Hey fellas, welcome back to our YouTube channel Goofy Harry, and today we are gonna see you 40 Harry Potter's Gringotts Vault had frozen egg of ancient dragon. This will be the crossover between Harry Potter and ancient dragon, so if you're new to this channel, please make sure to subscribe and like the video. Now, without any further delay, let's get straight to the video.
The morning started with a slap. Not a hard one. Aunt Petunia had learned that marks on visible skin invited questions from neighbours, but sharp enough to snap Harry's head sideways, sharp enough to make his eyes water, sharp enough to remind him of his place. He'd burned the bacon, not all of it. Just 2 strips. But Dudley wanted 12 perfect strips, and there were only 10 perfect strips, and that apparently was worth a slap. "Sorry," Harry said. He always said sorry. It was the fastest way through. You will be sorry if you ruin Duddy's special day. Petunia's voice had that thin, brittle quality it got when she was performing motherhood for an audience, even though the only audience was the kitchen. "It's his birthday, and everything will be perfect." Harry kept his eyes on the pan. The grease popped and spat at his wrists, and he shifted the bacon with a fork that was too big for his 6-year-old hands. Behind him, the kitchen table was buried under a mountain of wrapped presents, 42 of them, because Dudley had counted twice and thrown a tantrum until Uncle Vernon promised to buy 3 more at the shops today. 39 hadn't been enough. It was never enough. "Boy." Vernon's voice from the doorway. Harry didn't look up. "We're taking Dudley to London today. The zoo, then the toy shop on Regent Street. Mrs. Fig can't take you, her leg's bad, so you're coming." Harry's stomach flipped. London he'd never been. The Dursleys went sometimes, for Dudley's birthday or for Vernon's work dinners, and Harry would stay behind at Mrs. Fig's house, which smelled like cabbage and cat, and look at her photographs of every cat she'd ever owned. London was something he'd seen on the television through the crack in the cupboard door, a place with red buses and enormous buildings, a place that seemed to exist in a different universe from Privet Drive. "He's not sitting near me," Dudley said through a mouthful of bacon. "He smells. He'll sit in the back, you won't even know he's there." Vernon fixed Harry with a look. "You will not speak, you will not touch anything, you will not do anything. If you embarrass me in front of—" "I won't," Harry said. Vernon stared at him for a moment longer, then turned back to his paper. Harry finished the bacon, served it, and ate his own breakfast standing at the counter. 1 slice of toast with a thin scraping of margarine. He'd learned to eat fast. Food left unattended had a way of disappearing into Dudley. He washed up, then went to his cupboard under the stairs to change into Dudley's old clothes, a grey t-shirt that hung off him like a tent, jeans cinched with a bit of string because even the smallest belt was too big. He caught his reflection in the tiny shard of mirror he'd found in the garden and taped to the wall, a small, thin face, black hair that went everywhere no matter what he did, green eyes behind round glasses held together with tape. A strange, lightning-shaped scar on his forehead that Petunia said he'd gotten in the car crash that killed his parents. "You're going to London," he told his reflection, and despite everything, he almost smiled. The drive took an hour and 40 minutes, during which Dudley punched Harry's arm 11 times for the crime of existing in the same vehicle. Vernon swore at other drivers. Petunia applied lipstick in the visor mirror and talked about Mrs. Henderson's new conservatory, which was apparently both vulgar and desirable. Harry pressed himself against the car door and watched London materialize through the window, first the sprawl of suburbs, then the thickening press of buildings, then the city itself, huge and loud and alive. They parked near Regent's Park. The zoo was Dudley's first stop, and Harry trailed 10 feet behind the family like a ghost. He wasn't allowed to walk beside them. He wasn't allowed to point at things. When he paused too long at the gorilla enclosure, Vernon grabbed his collar and hauled him forward so hard his feet left the ground. But even so, even with the Dursleys, even in Dudley's tent clothes, even trailing behind like something unwanted, Harry felt a strange fizz in his chest. London was enormous. It had a pulse like a living thing. There were so many people that nobody looked at him twice, and that was its own kind of freedom. At Privet Drive, he was always the Potter boy, always watched, always wrong. Here he was invisible, and invisible felt better than noticed. The reptile house changed things. Dudley wanted to see the biggest snake. He pressed his face against the glass of the boa constrictor enclosure and rapped his knuckles against it. "Make it move," he whined. "Tap the glass, son." Vernon rapped too. The snake didn't move. Dudley lost interest in seconds and waddled to the next exhibit. Harry, forgotten as always, stayed behind. The snake was beautiful, long, dark, coiled. It looked as bored as he felt. "Sorry about them," Harry murmured. "He does that to everyone." The snake raised its head and looked at him. Harry blinked. The snake blinked. Then it nodded, a slow, unmistakable incline of its flat head, and Harry felt the fizz in his chest sharpen into something electric. He stumbled backward. The snake watched him with ancient, knowing eyes, and Harry had the strangest feeling that the glass between them was thinner than it looked. Dad, you won't believe what the snake is doing." Dudley shoved Harry out of the way. Harry's palms hit the stone floor. The electric feeling surged and the glass vanished, not cracked, not broken. Vanished. The boa constrictor slid out of its enclosure like a ribbon of dark muscle, and 30 people started screaming at once. Dudley, who had been leaning against where the glass had been, fell face first into the exhibit. Petunia's shriek hit a register that probably bothered dogs. Vernon went purple. Harry scrambled to his feet. The snake paused beside him, and he could have sworn it said thanks. Before it slithered toward the exit, sending a tide of tourists scrambling onto benches. Then Vernon's hand was on the back of his neck, squeezing, and the electric feeling died, and everything went cold. "What did you do?" "Nothing, I didn't. In the car now. The ride to the toy shop did not happen. Dudley screamed the entire way back to the car. Petunia wrapped him in her coat even though it was June. Vernon didn't speak for 10 blocks, which was worse than yelling. Harry pressed himself against the car door and tried to make himself as small as possible, which at 6 years old and barely 3.5 stone was very small indeed. They were somewhere in central London when Vernon pulled over. Harry didn't know the street. Tall old buildings. A pub on the corner that nobody seemed to notice. "Get out," Harry stared. "I said get out." Vernon reached across and shoved the door open. "You can walk, find your way back. Maybe a night in the cold will teach you to keep your freakishness under control." "Vernon," Petunia started. He vanished the glass, Petunia, in front of hundreds of people. What if someone from the neighborhood was there? What if someone saw? Harry climbed out of the car. The pavement was warm under his thin-soled shoes. He didn't cry because crying made things worse, and instead he watched the Dursleys' car pull away from the curb and merge back into traffic. Vernon didn't look back. None of them did. He stood on the pavement. People streamed around him like water around a rock. A woman in a business suit nearly tripped over him, muttered something, and kept walking. A bus roared by. Somewhere a siren wailed. Harry was 6 years old, alone in London, and he had no idea where he was. He walked. It was better than standing still and crying, so he walked. He turned left because the road curved that way, and then right because a group of teenagers on the left pavement looked scary, and then left again because he smelled food, a chip shop, and his stomach clenched hard enough to double him over. He hadn't eaten since the toast. He had no money. He kept walking. The afternoon tilted toward evening. Shadows lengthened. Harry's feet hurt and his glasses kept sliding down his nose, and he was scared, properly bone-deep scared, but he kept walking because what else was there? He couldn't go to the police. Vernon had told him, years ago, that if he ever talked to the police about anything, they'd put him in a home that was much worse than the cupboard under the stairs. Harry was 6 and he believed it. He found himself on a narrow street between 2 taller buildings, a street that seemed to exist in a fold of the city where the noise dimmed and the light went amber. The pub from before, or one like it, sat on the corner. Its sign read The Leaky Cauldron, and it had a quality that made Harry's eyes want to slide right past it. But the fizz in his chest, the one from the reptile house, pulsed faintly and his eyes stuck. He pushed the door open. Inside was dark, warm and old. A fire crackled in a hearth despite the June heat. People sat at wooden tables drinking from tankards, and they were, Harry blinked, wearing robes. Long, flowing robes in deep greens and browns and blues. A woman at the bar had a pointed hat. An old man in the corner was reading a newspaper, and the photographs were moving. Nobody noticed Harry. He was small and quiet and very good at not being noticed. He slipped through the pub, drawn by the fizz in his chest like a compass needle pointing north. Through the back, past a dusty corridor, he found a small courtyard with a brick wall. The fizz pulsed harder. He reached out, not knowing why, not knowing what he was doing, and pressed his palm flat against the bricks. They moved. They rearranged themselves, folding open like a stone flower, and beyond them was a street. Harry's breath stopped. The street was narrow and cobbled and packed with people in robes, and the shops sold things that couldn't exist. Cauldrons stacked outside one door. Broomsticks, actual broomsticks, in a window. A pet shop with owls and cats and things Harry didn't have names for. A sign overhead read Diagon Alley. He walked in and the wall closed behind him. Everything was colour and noise and impossible. A man walked past carrying a stack of books that floated in the air beside him. 2 children chased each other on toy broomsticks that hovered a foot off the ground. A shop window displayed a set of robes that adjusted themselves on a mannequin, changing colour every few seconds. Harry turned in a slow circle, mouth open, and for the first time in his life, the word that came to mind wasn't freak, it was magic. He wandered. Nobody stopped him. In Dudley's oversized clothes, he looked shabby but not unusual. There were other children around, some in equally mismatched outfits, dragged along by harried parents. Harry drifted from window to window, drinking it in, the fizz in his chest glowing warm and steady like a coal. And then he saw the building. It sat at the end of the alley, white marble, crooked, enormous, a building that leaned at angles that should have been impossible but somehow looked deliberate, like a giant had stacked blocks and dared gravity to complain. Bronze doors stood 3 times Harry's height. A plaque beside them read, "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed." Harry couldn't read all the words, he was 6, and while the Dursleys had never bothered to help him with reading, he'd taught himself enough from Dudley's discarded books, but he understood the tone. This place was important. He climbed the marble steps. A creature stood beside the doors, short, sharp-featured, with long fingers and dark eyes that looked like they'd seen everything twice and been unimpressed both times. It wore a uniform of scarlet and gold. Harry would later learn this was a goblin. Right now, he just knew it was watching him. "I'm sorry," Harry said, because that was always the safest thing to say. "I'm lost." The goblin's eyes flicked to his forehead, to the scar. Something shifted in its expression, not softness, nothing so human but a sharpening of attention, like a jeweler spotting a diamond in a pile of glass. "Lost," the goblin repeated. "Are you?" "I don't know where I am. I don't know how to get home." Harry paused. "I'm not sure I want to go home." The goblin studied him for a long moment, then it stepped aside and gestured toward the bronze doors. "In that case," it said, "you had better come inside." The interior of Gringotts' wizarding bank made Harry forget he was lost, scared, hungry, and 6. The hall was vast, white marble floors, long counters stretching into the distance, hundreds of goblins perched on high stools weighing coins, examining gems, scratching entries into enormous ledgers. Chandeliers of crystal and dragonfire, though Harry didn't know the fire was dragonfire yet, hung from a ceiling so high it vanished into shadow. The scale of the place was crushing. It was the biggest room Harry had ever been in, and every surface gleamed with a kind of ancient, terrifying wealth, but the goblins were what held him. They were everywhere, quick, sharp, precise. They spoke to each other in a language that sounded like stones grinding together, and they moved with a purpose that reminded Harry of ants, if ants wore waistcoats and handled gemstones the size of his fist. The goblin from the door led him to a counter at the far end of the hall, where a slightly older goblin sat writing in a ledger with a quill that moved faster than Harry's eyes could follow. "Griffock," the door goblin said. "The boy." Griffock looked up. His face was narrower than the other goblins, his eyes darker, and when he saw Harry's scar, his quill stopped mid-stroke. He set it down carefully, as if it might explode. "Name," Griffock said. "Harry Potter." The silence that followed was so complete Harry thought he'd gone deaf. Every goblin within earshot had stopped moving. Griffock's dark eyes were wide, wider than Harry had thought goblin eyes could go. "Harry Potter," Griffock repeated very quietly. "Yes, sir." Sir seemed safe. These creatures, goblins, whatever they were, had an air about them that demanded respect, and Harry had learned long ago that respect was the cheapest form of armor. Griffock leaned forward. "Do you know what this place is?" "A bank," the sign said bank. "Gringotts, the Goblin Bank." "The only bank." Griffock's lip curled, not quite a smile, but adjacent. "And you, Harry Potter, have a vault here." "I can't have a vault, I haven't got any money." "Your parents had money, quite a lot of it. It has been sitting here, gathering interest since the night they died." Griffock paused, watching Harry's face. "You didn't know?" I don't know anything, Harry said, and the honesty of it hurt. Griffock was silent for a moment. Then he did something that, Harry would later learn, was extraordinarily unusual for a goblin. He came out from behind his counter. Come with me, Harry Potter. They walked through a door behind the counter, down a stone corridor lit by torches that burned without heat, and into a chamber that held a single thing, a cart. It sat on rails that plunged into darkness, and it looked like a mine cart from a film Harry had once glimpsed through the Dursleys' living room door. Get in, Griffock said. Harry got in. Griffock climbed in beside him, pulled a lever, and the cart launched itself into the dark. Harry screamed, not in fear, but in something he'd never felt before. Joy. Pure, rushing, wind-in-his-face joy. The cart hurtled down through the earth at impossible speeds, banking around corners, plummeting through caverns, roaring over underground rivers that glowed faintly blue. Harry gripped the sides and laughed, actually laughed, and Griffock glanced at him with an expression that might have been surprise. Most humans vomit, Griffock observed. This is brilliant. The cart plunged deeper, the air grew colder. The torches on the walls grew sparse and then disappeared entirely, replaced by a faint phosphorescent glow from the stone itself. They were deep now, deeper than Harry's instincts said anything should be. Where are we going? Harry asked. The Potter family vault. Not the trust vault, that's higher up, set aside for your education. The family vault, Vault 687, ancient, one of the oldest in Gringotts. Griffock's voice had taken on a tone that Harry couldn't quite place. Reverence, maybe, or caution. It can only be opened by Potter blood. The cart slowed, then stopped. They were in a cavern, a corridor, carved from black rock with a single door at the end. The door was massive irondark, covered in symbols that seemed to shift when Harry looked at them directly. Touch the door, Griffock said. Harry walked to it. The stone floor was freezing under his thin shoes. The door loomed above him, enormous, ancient, and the symbols on its surface pulsed with a faint light that matched the fizz in his chest. He pressed his palm against the iron. Pain, a sharp prick like a needle, and then warmth that flooded up his arm and into his chest and behind his eyes. The door recognized him. He knew it the way he knew his own heartbeat. It knew his blood. The door opened. The vault beyond was not what Harry expected. He'd expected, well, he hadn't known what to expect, but maybe a room with some coins, like in a film. What he found was a cathedral. The space was enormous, carved from living rock, and it was full. Not just gold, though there was gold, heaps of it, coins and bars and objects that gleamed in the phosphorescent light, but things. Shelves lined the walls, holding books, weapons, artifacts, jewelry, bottles of liquid that glowed in colours Harry had no names for. Suits of armour stood in alcoves. Tapestries hung from the ceiling, depicting scenes of, Harry squinted, people riding horses. No, not horses, dragons, people riding dragons. The Potter family, Griffock said from behind him, and his voice was very quiet now, is one of the oldest wizarding lines in Britain. Older than the Blacks, older than the Malfoys. Your ancestors were among the founders of the wizarding world itself. He paused. There are things in this vault that have not been seen in 1,000 years. Harry barely heard him. He was walking deeper into the vault, drawn by something he couldn't explain. The fizz in his chest had become a pull, a tug, a rope around his ribcage dragging him forward. Past the gold, past the shelves, past the armour, into the back of the vault where the light dimmed and the air grew colder still, there was a pedestal. It was simple, plain stone, unadorned, and on it sat something that made Harry stop breathing. An egg. It was the size of a football, maybe larger, and it was black, not the flat black of paint, but a deep, layered black that seemed to contain other colours, like oil on water. Dark blues and purples and greens shifted in its depths. Frost covered its surface in intricate patterns, and the air around it was so cold that Harry's breath came out as fog. It was frozen. It had been frozen, Harry somehow understood, for a very long time. Don't, Griffock started. Harry touched it. The cold bit into his fingers so hard he gasped. But he didn't pull away. He couldn't pull away. The fizz in his chest exploded, not painfully but overwhelmingly, like a dam breaking, like every feeling he'd ever swallowed rushing out at once. The loneliness, the cupboard, the slaps, the hunger, the ache of being unwanted, it all poured out of him and into his hand and through his skin and into the egg, and the egg drank it. The frost cracked. Not slowly, it shattered all at once, like a window breaking, and the shards hung in the air for a heartbeat, glittering before they dissolved into mist. The egg's surface pulsed. Colour rippled through it. Deep, living colour, black and blue and violet. It was warm now. Harry could feel it breathing under his palm. "Griffock," Harry whispered. "It's alive." The goblin was beside him. Harry could hear his breathing, fast, sharp, controlled. When Harry glanced at him, Griffock's face was unreadable, but his hands were trembling. "That egg," Griffock said, "has been in this vault for 1100 years. It was placed here by Aldrich Potter, who was the last." He stopped, swallowed. "It's not possible." "What's not possible?" The egg cracked. A sound like a bell, no, like a note of music, clear and high and resonant, a sound that filled the vault and seemed to make the gold shiver. The crack ran from top to bottom, and light spilled through it, not white, not gold, but a deep, pulsing violet that painted the walls and the ceiling and Harry's face. He should have been scared. He was 6 years old in the bowels of a goblin bank, watching something hatch from an egg that had been frozen for a millennium. He should have been terrified. He wasn't. He was perfectly, completely, achingly calm. The shell fell away. The creature inside was small, smaller than Harry had expected, smaller than a cat, curled tight like a fist. It was black, the same layered black as the egg, and it was covered in fine scales that caught the light like crushed velvet. Wings, translucent, veined with violet, were folded tight against its body. A long tail curled around its hind legs. Its head was angular, elegant, with a snout that tapered to a blunt point and 2 ridges above its eyes that would, someday, become horns. It opened its eyes. They were green. Not just any green, his green. The exact shade of Harry's eyes, as if someone had taken the colour from his irises and pressed them into this creature's skull. The dragon, because that was what it was, that was unmistakably, impossibly what it was, looked at Harry Potter, and Harry Potter looked at the dragon, and something that had been broken in the boy's chest for as long as he could remember clicked into place. The dragon opened its mouth and made a sound, a tiny, thin, wavering cry, like a newborn kitten, and stumbled forward on unsteady legs across the remnants of its shell, and pressed its head against Harry's chest. The bond hit. It was like being struck by lightning and drowned in warm water at the same time. Harry felt the dragon's heartbeat sync with his, felt her, she was a her. He knew this suddenly and certainly. Hunger and confusion and newness, felt her first overwhelming impression of the world, which was, cold, bright, strange, but you are warm, you are mine, you are mine. Harry sat down hard on the stone floor. The dragon crawled into his lap, her claws pricking through Dudley's oversized jeans, and curled there, shaking. She was so small. She was so new, she needed him. Nobody had ever needed him before. He was crying. He hadn't meant to, and he couldn't stop. The tears ran down his face and fell onto the dragon's scales, and where they landed, the scales flashed violet for a moment before settling back to black. "Griffock," he managed. What is?" Griffock was on his knees. Not in reverence toward Harry. Harry would learn that goblins didn't kneel for wizards, but because his legs had given out. The goblin's face was pale, his dark eyes wider than seemed possible, and when he spoke, his voice cracked in a way that sounded almost painful. "Celestial obsidian." The words came out like a prayer. The last celestial obsidian egg. We thought it was in the records in the deep archives, but we assumed it was dead. A relic, eh? It's been 1100 years. Nothing survives that long in stasis, nothing. Is she a dragon? She is the dragon. The breed of dragon lords. The breed that bonded with human mages before Hogwarts existed, before the Ministry existed, before Mr. Potter. "Harry, do you understand what's happened?" Harry looked down at the creature in his lap. She'd stopped shaking. She was looking up at him with those green eyes, and through the bond, through this new, extraordinary channel between them, he felt something that wasn't words but was absolutely a thought, safe. "She chose me," Harry said. "The bond is unbreakable. It cannot be faked, forced, or stolen. The egg waited for you, for a Potter with enough raw magic to wake it. 1100 years, Mr. Potter. 1100 years, and you walk through my door." Griffock's voice hardened. "Do you know what this means?" Harry shook his head. Griffock stood. His composure was returning, but his eyes still burned. "It means you are a dragon lord, the first in over 1,000 years. It means that you, Harry Potter, are now the most valuable and the most dangerous person in the wizarding world." He looked toward the vault door as if expecting someone to burst through it. And it means we must be very, very careful about who finds out. Harry didn't understand most of that. He was 6. But he understood the weight of it, the way Griffock's voice dropped, the way the air in the vault seemed to thicken. "What do I do?" he asked. Griffock looked at him, looked at the dragon, who had begun to make a low, rumbling sound, a purr if dragons purred, against Harry's chest. "First," Griffock said, "you feed her. Then we talk." Feeding a newly hatched dragon, it turned out, was a complicated business. Griffock led Harry, who carried the dragon against his chest like an infant, her tail wrapped around his wrist, back through the corridors to a chamber behind the main hall. It was a goblin room, not meant for humans. The ceiling was low, the furniture small, the lighting dim, but it was warm and there was food. The dragon ate raw meat. Griffock produced it from somewhere. Harry didn't ask where, and the hatchling tore into it with a ferocity that startled him. She was barely bigger than a kitten, but her teeth were razor-sharp, and she growled at the meat like it had personally offended her. When she'd eaten her fill, an impressive amount for something so small, she crawled back to Harry, climbed his arm and settled on his shoulder, her tail coiled lightly around his neck. "She needs a name," Harry said. Traditionally, the dragon chooses the name through the bond. A feeling, an image, something the rider translates. Harry closed his eyes. Through the bond, he felt the dragon's contentment, warm, fed, safe, and beneath it, something deeper, a sense of vastness, of dark skies and distant stars and cold, ancient spaces between them. The dragon carried the memory of something old in her blood, something that knew the dark and wasn't afraid of it. "Nyx," Harry said. The word came out of him like it had always been there, waiting. "Her name is Nyx." On his shoulder, the dragon made a sound, a chirp bright and sharp, and butted her head against his jaw. Approval. "Nyx," Griffock tested the word. "Night, the primordial dark, yes, that will do." A door opened behind them, and another goblin entered, older than Griffock, broader, with silver threading through the dark hair at his temples, and a presence that filled the room like smoke. He wore more elaborate clothing than Griffock, a coat of dark leather with silver clasps and rings on every finger. When he saw Harry, when he saw Nyx, he stopped in the doorway. For 5 full seconds, nobody spoke. "Director Ragnok," Griffock said. "I sent word." "You sent word that Harry Potter had appeared in the bank?" Ragnok's voice was deep, resonant, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command attention. "You did not mention this. I thought it best to tell you in person." Ragnok walked to Harry. He moved slowly, deliberately, the way one approaches something that might be either a miracle or a bomb. He knelt in front of the boy again, not in reverence, but to bring himself to eye level, and studied Nyx with an expression that shifted from disbelief to wonder to something that looked almost like grief. "The last egg," he murmured. "So the records were true." "She's bonded," Griffock said. "Full bond, synchronized heartbeat, I witnessed it." Ragnok closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were hard. "How did you come to be here, Mr. Potter?" Harry told him. All of it, the Dursleys, the zoo, the glass, being left on the street, wandering through London, the pub that nobody seemed to see, the alley, the bank. He told it simply, without self-pity, because he didn't know that his life was unusual enough to warrant pity. He'd never told anyone about the cupboard, or the meals he missed, or the chores, or Dudley's fists. It simply was. It was his life. It was all he knew. By the end, Ragnok's jaw was clenched so tight that a muscle twitched in his temple. "The Dursleys," he said. "Muggles, non-magical folk." "And Dumbledore placed you with them?" "I don't know who Dumbledore is." Ragnok and Griffock exchanged a look. Something passed between them, not words, but a shared understanding that made the air in the room feel charged. "Albus Dumbledore," Ragnok said carefully, "is the most powerful wizard in Britain. He is the one who decided where you would live after your parents were killed. He is a complicated man. He does what he believes is right, and he is very rarely questioned. Among wizards," Ragnok's lip curled, "goblins are not wizards. Is he bad?" "He is certain, which can be worse." Ragnok stood. "Mr. Potter, Harry, what has happened today cannot be undone. The bond between a dragon lord and a celestial obsidian is permanent. Nyx will grow. She will become powerful beyond anything you can currently imagine, and through her so will you." He paused. Nyx had opened one eye and was watching him with a reptilian calm that looked odd on something so small. "There are people who will want to control this, to control you. The Ministry of Magic will want to regulate you. Dumbledore will want to guide you on his terms toward his ends." And there are others, darker forces, who will want the power of a dragon lord for themselves. Ragnar's gaze was steady. The goblins have a long memory, Harry. The last dragon lord alliance with our nation was a time of prosperity and respect that we have not known since. We would very much like to see that happen again. What are you saying? I'm saying that you need protection, education, and allies, and I'm saying that Gringotts will provide all three. He glanced at Griffook. Discreetly, Griffook nodded. There was a fire in his eyes that Harry didn't understand, a hunger not for gold, but for something less tangible. Respect, maybe, a seat at a table goblins had been denied for centuries. There is the matter of Dumbledore's monitoring spells, Griffook said. He tracks the boy. We've known this, it's in the old reports from when the Potter's will was sealed. Sealed, Ragnar's voice dropped. The will was read, sealed by the Wisengamot, on Dumbledore's recommendation. The Potters had specific instructions for Harry's guardianship, none of them involved muggles. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. My parents, Harry said slowly, didn't want me to live with the Dursleys. Griffook hesitated. Ragnar did not. Your parents, the director said, left a will naming several magical guardians, Sirius Black, your godfather, Alice Longbottom, your godmother. Failing those, any of several wizarding families. The will explicitly stated that you were never to be placed with Petunia Dursley. Ragnar's voice was flat, factual, and underneath it furious. The will was sealed before it could be executed. You were placed with the Dursleys within 24 hours of your parents' deaths. Harry absorbed this in silence. Nyx, sensing his emotions through the bond, pressed closer against his neck. Her scales were warm now, pulsing faintly with that deep violet light, and through the bond he felt her response to his pain, not words, but a fierce, hot thing, anger, not his, hers. Why? Harry asked. That, Ragnar said, is a question that Albus Dumbledore will one day have to answer. But not today. Today we have more immediate concerns. He looked at Nyx. A dragon cannot be hidden indefinitely, but it can be hidden for a while, long enough for you to grow, long enough for you to learn. He turned to Griffook. You found him, he is your charge. Griffook straightened. Understood, Director. You will manage his accounts, his education, and his security. You will liaise with the appropriate departments for Dragon Lord training, if anyone still remembers what that entails, and you will keep this secret from every wizard, witch, and ministry functionary who comes sniffing. And Dumbledore, especially Dumbledore. Ragnar looked at Harry one last time. You are going to have to go back to the Dursleys, Harry. For now, the blood wards Dumbledore placed on the house, they are real, and they protect you from things you don't yet understand, but you won't go back unprotected, and you won't go back unknowing. This, he gestured at the vault, the bank, Nyx, is your world, your real world. We'll make sure you're ready for it. Harry's hand found Nyx's head. She leaned into his touch. Through the bond he felt her, alert, curious, watching Ragnar with those green eyes. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Important things were being decided. Can she come with me? Harry asked. To the Dursleys? Griffook frowned. A dragon in a muggle suburb. She's small, I'll hide her, I'm good at hiding things. Harry's voice was steady in a way that a 6-year-old's voice shouldn't have been. He'd had a lot of practice being steady. She can stay in the cupboard with me. The silence that followed those words, the cupboard with me, was the loudest silence Harry had ever heard. Yes. Ragnar said, and his voice was granite. She can come with you. Griffook will provide concealment charms, and Griffook will visit you regularly to begin your education. He paused. You said you didn't want to go home, Harry. We're going to make sure that very soon you won't have to. They spent 3 more hours in the bank. Griffook took Harry to a small chamber where a goblin healer, a wizened old creature named Thornwick, who examined Harry with sharp hands and sharper eyes, catalogued a list of injuries and malnutrition symptoms that made Griffook leave the room. Harry heard something break in the corridor. He didn't mention it. Thornwick gave him potions, small vials of liquid that tasted like copper and grass and made his bones ache as they did whatever they were doing. Nutrition potions, Thornwick said, bone strengthening. Something for the scar tissue on his back that Harry didn't remember getting. The healer worked in silence, and when he was done, he looked at Harry with an expression that might have been pity if goblins were built for pity. You are underweight by 2 stone, Thornwick said. Your growth has been stunted. 3 of your fingers have been broken and healed incorrectly. You have 1st-degree burns on both forearms, kitchen burns from the pattern. He paused. You are 6 years old. Yes, sir. Goblins do not treat their enemies' children this way. Harry didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Nix, who had been sitting on the examination table watching Thornwick with suspicious eyes, climbed back onto Harry's shoulder and glared at the healer as if daring him to touch her rider again. After the healer, Griffock brought Harry food, real food, more than he'd ever been given in one sitting. Roasted chicken, potatoes, bread with actual butter, a thick stew that steamed and smelled like heaven. Harry ate until his stomach hurt and then kept eating because some deep, animal part of him whispered that food might not come again. Nix ate too, more raw meat, and this time Harry watched her more closely. She was already bigger than when she'd hatched, not dramatically but noticeably. Her legs were steadier. Her wings, when she unfurled them to shake off a scrap of meat, were wider. She was growing fast. How big will she get? Harry asked. Celestial obsidians are the largest of the ancient dragon breeds, Griffock said. He'd pulled a book from somewhere, old, leather-bound, the pages thick as cloth, and was reading from it while Harry ate. Fully grown, she could reach 60 feet from nose to tail, wingspan of over 100 feet. Her fire will not be ordinary fire. It will be infused with magic, capable of burning through shields and wards. The color will vary depending on intent. He turned a page. There are references here to celestial obsidians that lived for over 1,000 years. They are, for all practical purposes, immortal. Harry looked at Nix. She was chewing on a bone with single-minded intensity, her tail thumping against the table. 60 feet, he said, give or take. She's not going to fit in the cupboard for very long. No, Griffock agreed, she will not. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Griffock read. Harry ate. Nix alternated between eating, exploring the table, and headbutting Harry's elbow for attention. Through the bond, Harry felt her in a constant, low-level hum, contentment, curiosity, the occasional spike of alarm when a noise startled her. It was like having a second heartbeat, a second set of instincts. When Nix heard a sound in the corridor, Harry's head turned before he consciously registered it. The bond will deepen, Griffock said, as if reading his thoughts. Eventually you'll share senses, see through her eyes, feel what she feels. Some dragon lords could share magic through the bond, casting spells through their dragon and vice versa. It takes years to develop fully. How do you know all this? Griffock's expression shifted, a flicker of something dark and old. Goblins have longer memories than wizards. We remember the dragon lord age, because it was the last time wizards treated us as equals. The last dragon lord, Aldrich Potter, your ancestor, signed a treaty with the goblin nation that guaranteed mutual respect and shared governance of magical resources. When the dragon lords fell, the treaty was voided. Wizards took control. Goblins became bankers. He said the word like it tasted bitter. Is that why you're helping me? Harry asked. I'm helping you because you're a child who has been abused and abandoned and who just bonded with a creature of extraordinary power that he doesn't understand. Griffock met his eyes. The political implications are secondary, but they exist. Griffock stared at him. You're 6. I know. You're the most unsettling 6-year-old I've ever met. Harry almost smiled. It felt strange on his face, rusty, like a hinge that hadn't been used. The Dursleys say I'm unnatural. The Dursleys are correct, though not in the way they mean. Griffock closed the book. You are magical, Harry. You were born to magical parents in a magical world, and you are bonded to the most magical creature alive. There is nothing natural about you. He paused. That is not a bad thing. Nix chirped, as if agreeing. When it was time to leave, Griffock gave Harry 3 things. The first was a small pouch, bottomless, Griffock explained. It will hold far more than it should, and it's charmed to be invisible to muggles, containing gold coins that Harry could exchange at Gringotts for muggle money if he needed it. The second was a smooth, flat stone, dark as Nix's scales, that warmed when Harry held it. A communication stone, Griffock said. Hold it and think of me, I'll feel it, I'll come. The third was a thin book, hand-bound, with no title on the cover. The Dragon Lord Primer. It's the only copy. I had it transcribed from the deep archives today. Read it, learn it. It's in simple English because I assumed, correctly, that your education has been neglected. A pause. We'll fix that too. Harry held the book carefully. It was the first book anyone had ever given him. Griffock, thank you. The goblin looked uncomfortable, or as uncomfortable as a goblin could look, which mostly meant his scowl deepened slightly. Don't thank me yet. What comes next will be difficult. Keeping Nyx hidden, learning to control the bond, managing your magic. It's going to be hard. You are going to struggle. I've been struggling my whole life. This is different. This time you'll be struggling towards something. Griffock placed his hand on Harry's shoulder, a gesture so unexpected that Harry flinched. The goblin noticed, and something in his expression hardened further. We will come for you, Harry Potter, if you need us. Use the stone, we'll come. Harry nodded. Nyx, tucked inside his oversized shirt, purred against his chest. Griffock walked him back up through the bank, through the marble hall, past the counters where goblins had returned to their work. If any of them looked at Harry differently, if any of them had heard what had happened in the deep vaults, they didn't show it. Goblins, Harry was learning, were very good at keeping secrets. At the front doors, Griffock stopped. Can you find your way back? Through the leaky cauldron out to Muggle London? I think so. The Dursleys will be looking for you by now if they have a shred of decency. If not, use the stone. I'll arrange your return. Harry stepped out into Diagon Alley. The sun had set. The street was lit by floating lanterns and the warm glow of shop windows. Witches and wizards walked past him, laughing, talking, living their magical lives. None of them knew that the small boy in the baggy clothes was carrying a dragon under his shirt and the weight of a dead bloodline on his shoulders. He walked back through the leaky cauldron. The barman, a stooped old man named Tom, gave him a curious look but didn't stop him. Out through the front door into Muggle London, where the noise hit him like a wave. Cars, people, the rumble of buses. The air smelled different out here, exhaust and concrete instead of old wood and magic. Harry found a bench. He sat down. He was 6 years old, and in the last 8 hours he had spoken to a snake, been abandoned by his family, discovered a hidden magical world, learned he was rich, bonded with an ancient dragon, and been told he was the most dangerous person alive. Nyx poked her head out of his shirt collar. She looked around at Muggle London with an expression of supreme disdain, which was impressive for a creature with a head the size of a plum, then retreated back into the warmth. Through the bond, wrong place, not home, cold. I know, Harry murmured, but we'll find home, I promise. He held the communication stone. It warmed in his palm, and within minutes, Griffock appeared on the bench beside him, simply appeared without sound or flash, as if he'd always been there. The Dursleys are home, Griffock said. They did not call the police, they did not search for you. Petunia told a neighbour you were at a friend's house. His voice was carefully neutral. I will apparate you to the end of Privet Drive. Apparate. Magical teleportation. Hold my arm, don't let go. Harry held his arm. The world squeezed, a horrible, crushing sensation, like being shoved through a tube, and then they were standing in the cool evening air at the end of a very ordinary street lined with very ordinary houses. Number 4 was dark except for the blue flicker of the television in the front room. The concealment charm on Nyx will last approximately 12 hours, Griffock said. I'll teach you to reapply it at our first lesson. For now, keep her warm, keep her fed. Raw meat, preferably. She'll eat what you give her. When will I see you again? 3 days. I'll come to you, don't worry about how. Goblins have our own ways in and out of places. He paused. Harry. Yes. What happened today, the egg, the bond, all of it happened because your magic called to hers. Across 1100 years, through stasis and stone and silence, your magic woke her up. That means something. It means you are more than what the Dursleys have made you believe. Griffock's dark eyes held his. Do not forget that. He vanished, silently, completely, like smoke in a wind. Harry walked down Privet Drive. The houses squatted in their neat rows, identical, suffocating. Number 4's front garden was immaculate, Petunia's pride, and the driveway held Vernon's company car, freshly washed. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly as it had always been. Except that Harry Potter had a dragon curled against his heart, and nothing would ever be the same again. He let himself in through the back door. It was never locked. The Dursleys didn't think he was important enough to lock out or in. The kitchen was empty. He could hear the television in the front room. Some quiz show, Vernon's occasional grunt, Dudley's whine for more chocolate. Nobody called out. Nobody asked where he'd been. Nobody had noticed he was gone for nearly 10 hours. That used to hurt. Tonight it was a gift. Harry crept to his cupboard. He opened the door, ducked inside, and pulled it shut behind him. The space was small, a narrow cot, a bare bulb overhead, spiders in the corners, but it was his, and for the first time it didn't feel like a cage. He sat on the cot and pulled Nyx out of his shirt. She stretched, a full-body stretch, wings extending, tail uncurling, jaws opening in a yawn that revealed rows of needle-thin teeth, and then sat on his pillow looking at him through the bond, curiosity, warmth, a faint undercurrent of hunger already returning. "Welcome home," Harry told her. "It's not much, it's actually terrible, but it's ours." Nyx tilted her head. Then she crawled under the thin blanket, circled 3 times like a cat, and settled into a ball of warm, dark scales. One green eye peered out at him. "Safe, warm, yours." Harry lay down beside her. The cot was barely wide enough for him, and with Nyx taking up a corner he had to curl into himself, knees to chest. But Nyx radiated heat like a coal, and for the first time in his life, Harry Potter was not cold. He opened the Dragon Lord primer by the dim light of the bare bulb. The first page had a single line, written in an archaic script that somehow shifted into modern English as he looked at it. "You are not the dragon's master. You are not the dragon's servant. You are the dragon's other half. Where you end, she begins. Where she burns, you are the flame." Harry closed the book. He pressed his hand against Nyx's side and felt her heartbeat, steady and strong, synchronized with his own. "I'm Harry," he whispered to her, "and I think we're going to be okay." Nyx purred, and the sound vibrated through the cupboard walls, through the floor, through the foundations of number 4 Privet Drive, a tiny tremor, a note of something vast and ancient and powerful sleeping in the dark beneath the stairs. The spiders in the corners retreated. The shadows softened, and somewhere in a castle in Scotland, an old man's silver instrument spun and flickered, registering something they'd never registered before, a change in the magical signature of one Harry James Potter that defied explanation. Albus Dumbledore frowned, adjusted his half-moon spectacles, and made a note to look into it in the morning. By morning, the instruments had settled. The readings were normal. And Dumbledore, who had many concerns and many responsibilities and very little time for anomalies that corrected themselves, filed it away and moved on. He would come to regret that. But tonight, in a cupboard under the stairs, a boy and his dragon slept, and for the first time in Harry Potter's life, his dreams were not of darkness, they were of flight. Chapter 2. Small fires. 3 weeks after the egg hatched, Harry Potter learned that dragons were absolutely terrible at being quiet. It started at 4 in the morning. Nyx had grown. She was the size of a large cat now, which made the cupboard under the stairs a geometrically challenging proposition, and she was hungry. She was always hungry. Harry had learned to stockpile scraps from meals, to pocket the burnt edges of toast and the fatty trimmings of whatever meat Petunia cooked, to hide bits of food in the bottomless pouch Griffock had given him. But Nyx's appetite was growing faster than his ability to steal, and at 4 in the morning on a Tuesday, she decided to express her displeasure. The sound she made wasn't a roar. She was too small for that. It was more of a sustained, high-pitched keen, like a kettle boiling if the kettle were alive and furious, and it cut through the silence of number 4 like a knife through silk. Harry clamped his hand over her snout. She glared at him, green eyes blazing. "Hungry, hungry now." "I know." He hissed. "But you have to be quiet. If they hear you, Nyx didn't care about them." Through the bond, Harry felt her assessment of the Dursleys, irrelevant, annoying. The large one smelled bad. The small one was too loud. The thin one with the long neck was simply unpleasant. They were obstacles between Nyx and food, and Nyx's opinion of obstacles was straightforward. "Please," Harry whispered. "Just wait, I'll get you something." He crept out of the cupboard. The house was dark, the only sound Vernon's chainsaw snoring from upstairs. Harry padded to the kitchen in bare feet, opened the fridge, and found the remains of last night's roast chicken. Petunia had planned to use it for sandwiches. That was tomorrow's problem. He pulled off a leg and a thigh, wrapped them in a tea towel, and slipped back to the cupboard. Nyx fell on the meat like she hadn't eaten in days rather than hours, and Harry sat on his cot with his knees drawn up, watching her eat and listening to his own heartbeat. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks his life had split in 2 on one side, Privet Drive, the cupboard. Chores from dawn until the Dursleys didn't need him anymore, Dudley's fists when no adults were watching. Vernon's casual cruelty, the grabbing, the shouting, the long stretches of being treated like a stain on the carpet. Petunia's tight-lipped pretense that he didn't exist. On the other side, everything else. Griffock's visits, which came every 3 days like clockwork. The communication stone warm in his pocket, a reminder that someone knew he was here and would come if he called. The Dragon Lord Primer, which he read by the light of Nyx's faintly glowing scales at night, learning about a heritage he'd never known. And Nyx herself, growing, changing, filling the empty spaces in his chest with warmth and presence and the fierce, uncomplicated certainty that he mattered. The two sides didn't fit together. They ground against each other like mismatched gears, and Harry could feel the teeth wearing down. Griffook had said 3 days for his first lesson. He'd appeared in the cupboard, just appeared, silent as a shadow, crouching in the narrow space as if goblin teleportation were perfectly designed for appearing inside muggle cupboards, and Harry had nearly screamed. Lesson 1. Griffook had said, pulling out a small, flat case from inside his coat. Concealment charms. Harry had learned. Not with a wand, he didn't have one, and Griffook said wands were crutches that wizards had grown dependent on, but with intent. Raw magical intent, shaped by will, focused through the bond. It turned out that the Dragon Lord bond wasn't just emotional, it was a conduit. Nyx's magic and Harry's magic were braided together, and when Harry focused, really focused, pushing his intent through the bond and letting Nyx amplify it, he could do things. Small things at first. The concealment charm was a shimmering, not quite visible field that made Nyx difficult to notice. Not invisible, Griffook stressed this, but forgettable. A muggle who looked directly at her would see something odd blink, and then their brain would edit it out. Like the leaky cauldron, Harry thought. Like things the normal world didn't want to see, he'd practiced until he could cast it reliably, and then Griffook had moved on to other things. History, mostly. The goblin sat cross-legged on the cupboard floor. The indignity of the space clearly bothered him, though he never said so, and talked, and Harry listened. He learned that his family, the Potters, were among the oldest magical bloodlines in Europe. That the name went back over 1,000 years to Linfred of Stinchcombe, a healer and inventor, but that the magical bloodline went further still, to the Peverills, who were woven into the legends of wizarding Britain so deeply that separating fact from myth was nearly impossible. He learned that the Dragon Lord tradition had flourished in the early medieval period, when bonded pairs of wizard and dragon had been the supreme power in the magical world, not rulers exactly, but protectors. Guardians. Forces of nature that kept the peace because nobody was foolish enough to challenge them. What happened to them? Harry had asked. What always happens, Griffook had answered. Fear. The unbonded wizards grew afraid of the Dragon Lord's power. The ministries of the time, or their equivalents, lobbied to restrict dragon bonding. Wild dragons were hunted, pushed to the margins. The bonding eggs were destroyed or hidden. The last Dragon Lord, Aldrich Potter, saw which way the wind was blowing and placed his dragon's final egg in stasis in the family vault. He hoped that someday a Potter would come who could wake it. He waited 1,100 years. He had faith. Goblins respect faith backed by action. Griffook had opened the primer to a specific page. Aldrich also left instructions, training regimens, techniques for developing the bond. He wrote it all down because he knew the oral tradition would die with him. You're holding the only surviving Dragon Lord manual in existence, Harry. Treat it accordingly. Harry had treated it like a holy text. He read it every night, absorbing the archaic language, passing the exercises, trying the meditation techniques that Aldrich described for deepening the bond. Some of it was beyond him. He was 6, and the primer assumed a reader with at least basic magical education, but the core of it was simple enough. The bond was built on trust, on openness, on letting Nyx in and letting himself flow into Nyx. Like a river with 2 banks, Aldrich wrote, the bond is not a bridge but the water itself. Harry was good at this part. He'd spent his whole life wishing for someone to connect with, someone who understood him without words. Nyx was that someone. Every night he lay in the dark with her curled against him and let the bond widen, let himself feel what she felt, see the faint impressions of what she saw. The cupboard through dragon eyes was dimmer but richer, a tapestry of heat signatures and magical currents. Sense the edges of her thoughts. She was growing more articulate through the bond as she grew physically. The first week had been pure emotion, hunger, comfort, alarm. By the 3rd week there were images, fragments of something approaching language, not words but concepts. Food, dark, warm, you. Mine, outside was the problem. Nyx wanted out, she wanted sky. The instinct was deep in her, deeper than the bond, bred into her bones by a million years of evolution. She was a creature of wind and open spaces, and the cupboard under the stairs was slowly driving her mad. She'd taken to scratching the walls. Her claws left marks in the wood that Harry had to sand down with a stolen bit of sandpaper, and pressing herself against the cupboard door, keening softly. It broke Harry's heart. He'd take her out at night sometimes, slipping into the back garden after the Dursleys were asleep, and she'd scramble around in the grass like a demented cat, chasing moths and testing her wings with short, clumsy hops that carried her 3 or 4 feet off the ground. She'd never flown, not properly. She was too young, too small, and even if she could, a dragon circling over Little Whinging at 3 in the morning would be difficult to explain. But she was growing. Every day, noticeably. At the current rate, she wouldn't fit in the cupboard within a month. Harry had told Griffook this, and the goblin had frowned and said they were working on alternatives. Something about a sanctuary, protected land, a place where Nyx could grow without being seen. But it wasn't ready yet, and in the meantime Harry had to manage. Manage the concealment charms, manage the feeding, manage the noise, manage the scratches on the walls and the faint smell of dragon musk that was slowly permeating the cupboard. He was 6. He was managing. Nyx finished the chicken, crunched through the bones with appalling ease, and licked her chops. Her tongue was long and dark and forked, and when she was satisfied, she made the rumbling purr that Harry loved, the sound that vibrated through his ribs and settled something anxious in his chest. Good, full, you eat. I'll eat at breakfast, if there was breakfast, if Petunia gave him any after the chicken was discovered missing. Harry pushed that thought away. Go back to sleep, sun's not up yet. Nyx circled on the pillow, tucked her tail over her nose and closed her eyes. Within seconds, the bond softened to the low, warm hum of her sleeping mind, dreams of flight, always of flight, vast dark skies and cold stars and the rush of wind over wings she hadn't spread yet. Harry didn't sleep. He pulled out the primer and read by the faint violet glow of Nyx's scales. The bond between Lord and Dragon is not a tether but a tapestry, Aldrich had written. Each thread is a shared experience, every moment of trust, every act of courage, every instance where rider and dragon choose each other. The tapestry cannot be woven quickly. It is the work of years. But once woven, it cannot be cut, not by distance, not by magic, not by death itself. The dragon will know the Lord's heart, and the Lord will know the dragon's fire, and together they will be something that neither could be alone. Harry closed his eyes and felt Nyx's sleeping heartbeat against his own. I choose you, he whispered. Every time, through the bond, a flicker, Nyx, half asleep, responding not with words but with a pulse of something vast and warm and certain, always. Morning came with its usual cruelties. Harry was up before the Dursleys, as always. The alarm clock in the cupboard was set for 6, so he could start breakfast before Vernon came thundering down the stairs. He left Nyx sleeping under the blanket with the concealment charm freshly applied and went to the kitchen. Petunia discovered the missing chicken at 6:47 a.m. during the precise inventory she conducted of the refrigerator every morning. The roast. Her voice could have etched glass. There was a whole leg and a thigh left. Where are they? Harry, at the stove scrambling eggs, kept his face neutral. I don't know, Aunt Petunia. Don't lie to me, boy. Maybe Dudley had a midnight snack. He does sometimes. It was a calculated risk. Dudley did raid the fridge at night regularly, and Petunia's inability to believe anything negative about her son was Harry's most reliable shield. He watched the calculation flicker across her face. Accept that her precious Dudders had eaten the chicken, or accept that the freak nephew she despised had beaten her security measures. Duddy is a growing boy, she said stiffly, and the matter was dropped. Harry served breakfast and ate his own portion, 1 egg, 1 slice of toast standing at the counter, and then began the morning chores. Washing up, wiping surfaces, taking out the bins. Weeding the front garden, which he actually didn't mind because it got him into fresh air and sunlight, both of which Thornwick's nutrition potions had made him crave. He was on his knees in the flower bed, pulling dandelions when he felt it. A flicker through the bond, not from Nyx, from outside. From somewhere above, Harry looked up. The sky was a flat English grey, featureless. Nothing moved, but the flicker came again, a sensation like being watched, like a pair of eyes he couldn't see tracking him from a distance. He reached for Nyx through the bond. She was awake now, alert, pressing against the cupboard door. Something outside, looking, not safe. Harry pulled another dandelion with deliberate calm. "It's fine," he murmured, so softly that anyone watching would have seen a boy talking to a weed. "I feel it too, stay still." The watching feeling lasted about 10 minutes, then faded. Harry finished the garden and went back inside, his heart hammering. In the cupboard, Nyx was wound tight as a spring, her scales darkened to pure black camouflage. Harry realized, an instinct. She was making herself harder to see. "Something was watching us," Harry said. "Could you tell what it was?" Through the bond, Nyx sent an impression, a sense of age, of power held carefully in check, of someone looking through magical means rather than physical ones. Scrying, Harry thought, the primer mentioned it. A way of seeing at a distance through magical instruments. Dumbledore, it had to be. Harry pulled the communication stone from under his mattress and pressed it between his palms. Within 3 minutes, Griffock was standing in the cupboard, slightly out of breath. What happened? Someone was watching me, magically, from outside. Harry described the sensation, Nyx's reaction, the timing. Griffock's face went very still. The monitoring spells. Dumbledore checks them periodically, we knew this, but active scrying is different, that's direct observation. Something has changed. "The instruments," Harry said. "In Scotland, you told me Dumbledore has instruments that monitor me. If they spiked when the bond formed, they would have settled by now. The bond is integrated into your magical signature. To an outside observer, you'd just read as slightly more powerful than expected for your age, unless he looked very closely." Griffock paced, 2 steps in each direction, which was all the cupboard allowed. "He may be looking closely." "What do we do?" "Nothing changes. You're still protected by the blood wards, which means you're still invisible to the dark forces Dumbledore fears. As long as you stay in this house, he has no reason to intervene directly." The scrying was probably routine, a checkup. "He'll have seen a boy doing garden work, nothing unusual. And if he looks again, then he sees a boy doing garden work. Keep the concealment charm on Nyx, keep the primer hidden, do nothing to draw attention." Griffock stopped pacing. "Harry, I know this is difficult, it's fine." Harry's voice was flat. "I'm used to being watched. At least Dumbledore isn't throwing things." Griffock flinched, actually flinched, a visible ripple of something crossing his sharp features. He crouched down so he was eye level with Harry, and his voice dropped. "I've spoken with Director Ragnarok. The sanctuary is nearly ready. A property in Wales, old, warded, goblin-owned land that doesn't appear on any ministry registry. Once it's prepared, we can extract you from here permanently. And the blood wards will break. Yes, Dumbledore will know immediately. And then..." Griffock's jaw tightened. "And then we deal with Dumbledore on our terms, not his." Harry nodded. Nyx, who had been following the conversation through the bond, not the words but the emotional tenor, pressed her head against his hand. "Soon. Sky soon, I know, soon." "How long?" Harry asked. "Weeks, a month at most." A month. Harry could do a month. He'd survived 6 years of the Dursleys, he could survive another month, but Nyx was growing and the cupboard was shrinking, and somewhere in Scotland, an old man with half-moon spectacles was looking more closely than he had in 5 years. The clock was ticking. Griffock's lessons continued. Every 3 days the goblin appeared in the cupboard or, when the cupboard became too cramped with Nyx's growing bulk, in the back garden after dark, and taught Harry things that no 6-year-old in the wizarding world was learning. Magical theory came first. Not spellcasting, Griffock said, that was premature without a wand, and that Dragon Lord magic worked differently from wand magic anyway, but the underlying principles. Magic, Griffock explained, was not a force but a language. Every spell, every enchantment, every potion was a sentence in that language, and understanding the grammar mattered more than memorizing vocabulary. "Wizards teach children to wave a stick and say Latin words," Griffock said, with the disdain he reserved for all things wizard-related. "They learn the words without understanding the language. A goblin smith speaks the language fluently. A dragon lord speaks it natively, because the dragon bond provides immersion. Your magic and Nyx's magic are already teaching each other the grammar. You don't need to memorize incantations. You need to understand intent." "Show me," Harry said. Griffock placed a small stone on the ground between them. "Move it." Harry looked at the stone. He'd done accidental magic before, the glass at the zoo, but that had been involuntary, a surge of emotion that exploded outward. Griffock was asking for something controlled. He reached for the bond. Nyx was beside him, alert, watching. Through the bond, Harry felt her magic, a deep, slow current like magma beneath stone. He let his own magic touch it, felt the two currents braid together, and then he pushed, not physically but with intent. Move. The stone. Move. The stone shot across the garden and embedded itself in the fence. Griffock blinked. Nix chirped smugly. Less force, Griffock said. More precision. Again. They practiced for an hour. By the end, Harry could move the stone with reasonable accuracy, floating it, spinning it, setting it down gently, though his control was inconsistent. Sometimes the stone drifted like a feather, sometimes it rocketed sideways and nearly took out a garden gnome. Nix's magic was powerful but raw, and filtering it through the bond was like trying to drink from a fire hose. It'll come, Griffock said. The bond is 3 weeks old. Give it time. But time was the one thing Harry wasn't sure he had. The Dursleys' tolerance, never high, was eroding. Harry's absences in the garden at night hadn't gone unnoticed. Vernon had started locking the back door, which meant Harry had to unlock it with the bond magic, which left traces that made the door handle warm to the touch. Petunia had found scratches on the cupboard wall. Harry's excuse of, "I had a nightmare," had been accepted with a slap and a warning. Dudley, with the animal instinct of all bullies, sensed that Harry had changed, that something was different and he didn't like it. "What have you got in there?" Dudley demanded one afternoon, pressing his considerable bulk against the cupboard door. "I heard something, a noise. There's nothing in there." Harry's heart was hammering. Nix, behind the door, had gone very still, the predator stillness of a creature deciding whether to fight. Through the bond, threat, remove threat, bite, no biting, stay still. "I'm going to tell Dad you've got something in there, a pet. You're not allowed pets." It was the pipes, Dudley, the cupboards next to the pipes. "Liar, I heard it breathing." "Pipes breathe sometimes, it's called air pressure." Harry had no idea if this was true, but Dudley wasn't exactly going to fact-check him. Dudley's eyes narrowed. He kicked the cupboard door hard and stomped away. Inside, Nix was vibrating with a low, subaudible growl. Through the bond, Harry felt her rage, not at the kick itself, but at the disrespect. She was a dragon. She was ancient magic incarnate, and a fat child had kicked her den. "Let me out, I will show him." "You will show him nothing," Harry murmured. "He's not worth it, he hurts you. He's a child." "He doesn't know any better." "You are a child, you know better." Harry didn't have an answer for that. The crisis came on a Thursday. Harry was cooking dinner, sausages, chips and beans, one of Dudley's favourites, when Nix, locked in the cupboard, decided she'd had enough. The bond screamed. Not with words or images, but with a raw, primal eruption of need, claustrophobia, hunger, frustration. The agony of a creature built for boundless skies crammed into a space barely big enough for a child. Harry gasped, dropping the pan, and the sausages hit the floor at the exact moment that something thumped against the cupboard door hard enough to rattle the frame. Vernon looked up from his newspaper. A second thump. The cupboard door bulged outward. Nix's keening, that high, terrible sound, pierced through the wood. "What the bloody hell?" Vernon was on his feet. "It's nothing." Harry grabbed the sausages off the floor, hands shaking. "It's the pipes are." A third thump. The door cracked visibly, a split running from top to bottom. On the other side, Nix was throwing herself against it, and through the bond Harry felt her panic spiral, felt her wings battering the walls, felt her fire. She had fire now, small but real. She'd manifested it for the first time 2 days ago, and Harry had barely contained it. Rising in her throat, he dropped everything and sprinted for the cupboard. Vernon was right behind him, bellowing. Petunia was shrieking from the kitchen doorway. Dudley, on the sofa, was staring with his mouth open. Harry grabbed the cupboard door handle and shoved his intent through the bond with everything he had. Not a spell, not a technique, just pure desperate will. "Stop, be still, I'm here." The thumping stopped, the keening died. Through the bond, Nix's panic subsided into shaking, heaving breaths and the whimper of a frightened animal. "Open that door," Vernon said. His voice was quiet, which was terrifying. Vernon quiet was worse than Vernon's screaming. "Open it now. Uncle Vernon, you've got something in there." A stray, a cat, something you've brought in off the street. "I will not have vermin in my house." "Open the door." Harry's mind raced. The concealment charm was active. Nix should be difficult for a muggle to notice, but that relied on the muggle not looking directly and carefully. If Vernon opened the door and stared into the cupboard, looking specifically for something living, the charm might not hold. It was designed for casual notice, not direct scrutiny. He had seconds to decide. It was me, Harry said. I was banging on the door. I wanted to get out. I was upset. I'm sorry. Vernon stared at him. Behind the door, Nyx was silent, pressed against the far wall. Through the bond, Harry felt her forcing herself still, responding to his desperation. You were in the kitchen, Vernon said. I went to the cupboard first, before the sausages. I was banging because I was angry. About the chores, I'm sorry. It was a terrible lie. Vernon's eyes narrowed. Harry could see him weighing it, the inconvenience of investigating versus the comfort of dismissing. If I find an animal in this house, Vernon said, I will drown it in the bathtub in front of you. Do you understand? Yes, Uncle Vernon. Pick up those sausages, wash them, cook them properly, and if dinner is late, you don't eat for 2 days. Vernon returned to his chair. Harry picked up the sausages with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. That night, after the Dursleys were asleep, Harry sat in the dark cupboard with Nyx in his lap and pressed the communication stone until it burned. Griffock came within minutes. He took one look at Harry's face, at Nyx, who was trembling against Harry's chest, her scales dark and dull with stress, and at the cracked cupboard door, and his expression hardened into something that Harry had never seen on the goblin's face before, cold fury. Tell me, Griffock said. Harry told him. All of it, the thumping, Vernon's threat, the lie, the cracked door. Nyx couldn't stay here. She was too big, too restless, too alive. The cupboard was killing her slowly, and it was killing Harry to watch. He said he'd drown her, Harry finished. He doesn't know what she is, but he said in front of me, I heard you. Griffock's voice was controlled in a way that suggested considerable effort. The sanctuary isn't ready. I don't care. Harry, I don't care. She can't stay here. Another week in this cupboard and she'll set the house on fire. She has fire now, Griffock, and she can't always control it. If Vernon opens that door and sees her, I don't know what he'll do, but I know what she'll do. She'll defend herself. She'll burn him. And then the ministry, Dumbledore, everyone finds out. Griffock was quiet for a long moment. Nyx watched him with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. There may be a middle solution, Griffock said slowly. Not the full sanctuary that needs another 2 weeks, but we have a holding space. Old goblin tunnels beneath London, ventilated, secure, large enough for her to stretch her wings. She could stay there during the day and be brought to you at night. Separated. The word felt like a blade. Through the bond, Nyx flinched, temporarily. The bond can sustain short separations at this stage. You'll feel her, she'll feel you, but the physical distance will ache. I won't pretend otherwise. For 2 weeks. At most. Harry looked down at Nyx. She looked back at him. Through the bond, he felt her understand the situation, not the details, but the necessity. She didn't want to leave him. Every fibre of her being screamed against it. But she could feel his fear, his desperation, and she trusted him. If you say go, I go, but you come back. Always come back. Always, Harry whispered. I promise. Then it's decided. Griffock reached into his coat and pulled out a second communication stone, darker than the first. This one is for Nyx. Keep it with her. It will carry your emotional state to her, a thread of the bond maintained over distance. It won't be the same as being together, but it will keep her calm. Harry pressed his forehead against Nyx's. Her scales were warm, her breath hot against his skin. Through the bond, he poured everything he had, love, gratitude, the promise of open skies and freedom. She rumbled low and butted her head against his jaw. 2 weeks, Harry said, and then we're done with this place. Griffock took Nyx that night. The goblin wrapped her in a dark cloth. She went reluctantly, claws hooking into Harry's shirt, eyes wide and betrayed, and then they both vanished with a crack of apparition that Harry felt in his bones. The cupboard was empty. The silence was deafening. Through the bond, Harry felt Nyx's distress, the sudden distance, the unfamiliar space, the absence of his heartbeat against hers, and he pressed the communication stone so hard his palm bled. I'm here, I'm not gone, a shudder through the bond. Then, slowly, Nyx settled. The goblin's stone was working. She could feel him. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Harry lay on his cot in the empty cupboard and stared at the ceiling and did not sleep. The 2 weeks that followed were the longest of Harry's life. Without Nyx's physical presence, the cupboard reverted to what it had always been, a small dark box where an unwanted child slept. The warmth was gone. The purring was gone. The sense of being chosen was still there. The bond hummed constantly, a lifeline across the miles, but it was muted, like music heard through a wall. Harry threw himself into Griffook's lessons with an intensity that startled the goblin. Without the distraction of keeping Nyx hidden, he could focus entirely on learning, and what he absorbed in those 2 weeks would have taken a normal student months. Magical theory expanded into practical application. Griffook taught him to channel the bond magic into specific effects: warming charms, cooling charms, minor shields. The Dragonlord primer described these as embercraft, small workings that drew on the bond's passive energy rather than requiring active channeling from Nyx. Harry could feel her magic like a reservoir within him, a deep well of warmth that he could draw on in sips. Not much, distance weakened the flow, but enough. "You're progressing faster than I anticipated," Griffook said one evening, watching Harry hold a small shield, a shimmering disk of violet energy, steady for 30 seconds. "The bond is maturing at an accelerated rate. Aldrich's notes describe a similar phenomenon in the early months. The bond grows fastest when it's being actively used." "It's because she's not here," Harry said. "The bond is reaching further to compensate. I can feel it stretching." Griffook looked at him sharply. "That's an insight I wouldn't expect from a 40-year-old wizard, let alone a 6-year-old boy." "I spend a lot of time in the dark with nothing to do but think." Harry let the shield dissipate. "How is she? Growing? The tunnels are adequate, but she's already testing their limits. She's attempted flight 3 times, the ceiling isn't high enough, she's frustrated." Griffook paused. "She misses you. I know, I feel it. The sanctuary will be ready in 4 days. When it is, we're extracting you simultaneously. No more half measures." Harry nodded. 4 days. He could do 4 days. Beyond the lessons, Griffook was also educating Harry in things that had nothing to do with magic. Reading, proper reading, at a level far beyond what Harry's neglected schooling had provided. Mathematics, history, both goblin and wizarding, geography. The basics of the political landscape Harry would eventually have to navigate: the Ministry of Magic, the Wisengamot, the old pureblood families with their alliances and feuds. "Why do I need to know politics?" Harry had asked. "Because you are Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the last scion of a noble house and a dragon lord. You could hide from all of that, and for a while you should. But eventually you will enter the wizarding world, and when you do, ignorance will be your greatest enemy. Not dark wizards. Not ministry bureaucrats. Ignorance." Harry filed it away. He filed everything away. The cupboard had given him one gift: the ability to be patient, to accumulate knowledge like a miser hoarding coins, to wait and watch and learn. He was 6, and he was already learning that the world was a chess game, and he intended to know the board before he moved a single piece. The Dursleys, meanwhile, were happier than Harry had seen them in weeks. Without Nyx's sounds, without the mysterious scratches and the missing food, the house was calm. Vernon's suspicion faded. Petunia's vigilance relaxed. Dudley, deprived of the excuse of something in the cupboard, went back to his usual routine of eating, watching television, and hitting Harry when the mood struck. Harry bore it. He had 4 days. He had a dragon waiting for him. He had a future that didn't include this house. On the 3rd night, something happened that he didn't expect. He was lying in the dark, reaching through the bond to Nyx, feeling her sleeping mind, the warmth of her dreams, the steady pulse of her growing magic, when he felt something else. A different kind of watching. Not Dumbledore's distant scrying, which he'd felt twice more and learned to recognize. Something closer. Something on the street. Harry sat up. The bond sharpened. Nyx, miles away, snapped awake, responding to his sudden alertness. "What? Danger? I come stay. I'm checking." He crept to the cupboard door and opened it a crack. The hallway was dark. The Dursleys were asleep. Through the window beside the front door, he could see the street outside. Orange streetlights, parked cars, the neat rectangles of suburban lawns, and a figure. Standing across the street, half hidden in the shadow of the hedge between number 3 and number 5. Tall, thin, wearing dark robes that didn't belong on Privet Drive. The figure's face was obscured, but something about the way it stood, perfectly still with a concentrated intensity, told Harry it was watching the house, watching him. Through the bond, Harry channeled the heightened perception that Nyx's magic granted him. The world sharpened, colours intensified, and in the figure across the street Harry saw, felt a magical signature, complex, layered, tightly controlled, a wizard without question, powerful. Not Dumbledore. The signature was different, darker, more volatile, like a fire banked but not extinguished. The figure moved, not toward the house, away down the street, cloak billowing. Harry watched it until it turned the corner and vanished. He pressed the communication stone. Griffook appeared in minutes. Someone was watching the house, Harry said. A wizard, not Dumbledore, different magical signature, powerful. Griffook's expression went very flat. Describe the signature. Harry did his best. Griffook listened, asked questions, and then went silent for a long time. Could be a number of people, he said finally. Dumbledore has agents, members of an organization he runs, the Order of the Phoenix. They watched this house in the first year after your parents' death, then pulled back when the blood wards proved stable. He paused. But if Dumbledore is sending watchers again, it means he's concerned. About what, I don't know, but the timing is poor. The extraction is still happening. Tomorrow night, not the day after, I'm moving it up. Griffook's dark eyes were hard. No more risks, we've pushed our luck far enough. Harry's heart kicked. Tomorrow, midnight, I'll come for you here and we'll go directly to the sanctuary. Nix will already be there. Griffook paused. Harry, when we break the blood wards, Dumbledore will know within minutes. He'll come here, he'll find you gone, and then the game begins in earnest. I'm ready. You're 6. I'm ready. Griffook looked at him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, the goblin's thin mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. I believe you are. The next day crawled. Harry did his chores with mechanical precision, his mind 1,000 miles away. He weeded the garden, washed the kitchen floor, scrubbed the bathroom, made lunch, made dinner. Dudley tripped him on the stairs, and he barely noticed. Vernon shouted at him about something, the quality of the mashed potatoes, maybe, and Harry said sorry. At the appropriate intervals and thought about midnight, through the bond, Nix was restless. She could feel his anticipation, and it infected her. She paced in the goblin tunnels, her claws clicking on stone. She tried to fly again. Harry felt the frustration of wings spread wide in a space too small, and the howl of need that followed made his chest ache. Tonight he sent through the bond. Tonight we go, together. Sky, an explosion of emotion came back, joy so fierce it was almost painful. Sky, fly. Together. Now soon, be patient. Dragons are not patient, Harry almost laughed. This dragon will be a grumble. A huff, the mental equivalent of crossed arms, but beneath it trust. Nix trusted him. She would wait. Midnight approached with agonizing slowness. Harry lay in the cupboard, fully dressed, the bottomless pouch packed with everything he owned, which wasn't much. The Dragon Lord primer. The communication stones. A change of Dudley's old clothes. A small photograph he'd found years ago in a box in the attic, hidden under a pile of Petunia's old things. A young couple, the man with messy black hair and glasses, the woman with red hair and green eyes, laughing in a garden with a baby in her arms, his parents. The only picture he had. At 11:58 p.m. the cupboard door opened silently and Griffook was there. Ready. Harry stood. He took one last look at the cupboard, the stained mattress, the bare bulb, the spiders, the scratches on the wall where Nix's claws had scored the wood. He felt nothing for it. No nostalgia, no sentimentality. It was a box they'd kept him in, and he was done with boxes. Ready. Griffook led him through the house to the back garden. The night was cool and clear, a waning moon, stars visible despite the suburban light pollution. Harry breathed in and felt the fizz in his chest, the fizz that had led him to Diagon Alley, that had guided him to the egg, flare bright and warm. The extraction team is standing by, Griffook said. When we apparate, the blood wards will break. It will feel like what? Like a wall falling. Griffook held out his arm. Don't let go. Harry took his arm. He turned for one last look at number 4 Privet Drive. The house squatted in the dark, bland and malevolent, every brick soaked in the misery of his childhood. Goodbye, he said, and meant it absolutely. Griffook turned and the world squeezed. The blood wards broke. Harry felt it, not a wall falling but a chain snapping. A chain he hadn't known was there, wrapped around his magical core, anchoring him to the house, to the bloodline of Petunia Dursley, to a protection he'd never asked for. It broke with a sound that wasn't sound, a vibration in the fabric of magic itself. And Harry gasped as something inside him expanded, unfolding like wings that had been pinned. Somewhere in Scotland, every silver instrument in Albus Dumbledore's office went haywire. But Harry didn't know that and wouldn't have cared. Because the apparition resolved, the crushing sensation released, and he was standing on a hillside in Wales, and the air tasted of salt and rain and freedom, and in front of him she was bigger than he'd expected. The goblin tunnels had given her room to grow, and she'd used it. Nyx was the size of a large dog now, her scales gleaming deep obsidian in the moonlight, her wings, spread wide in the night air, catching the wind. Her eyes, those impossible green eyes, locked onto him across 50 feet of Welsh hillside, and the bond sang. Harry ran, Nyx ran. They collided in the middle, and Harry threw his arms around her neck and buried his face in her warm scales, and she wrapped her wings around him like a shelter, and the bond opened fully, not the stretched, muted connection of the last 2 weeks, but the full, blazing torrent. Every emotion he'd suppressed, every fear, every lonely night in the cupboard, every slap and shout and cold shoulder, it all poured out of him and into her, and she took it all, absorbed it, answered it with fire and warmth and the absolute, unshakable knowledge that he would never be alone again. Mine, found you, never again, never leave. Never, Harry promised, and the word came out broken but true. Never again. Behind him, Griffock stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching with an expression that on a goblin might have been called gentle. The hillside stretched around them, wild, windswept, dotted with ancient stones, and beyond it, the sea glittered under the moon. "Welcome to the sanctuary," Griffock said quietly. "Welcome home." Harry lifted his face from Nyx's scales. He was crying, had been for a while, and he wiped his eyes on his sleeve and looked around. The hillside was bordered by forest on one side and cliffs on the other. Below the cliffs, waves crashed against rocks. Above, the sky was enormous, wider and darker and more star-filled than anything Harry had seen from Little Whinging. "It's 100 acres, Griffock continued. "Goblin-warded, unplottable, it doesn't appear on any map, magical or muggle. The wards will repel anyone without explicit permission. There's a house on the other side of the hill, small but functional. Food, supplies, books, everything you'll need." Harry nodded. Nyx was nosing at him, investigating, smelling his hair, his hands, his face, cataloguing 2 weeks' worth of changes with the thoroughness of a creature whose primary sense of connection was physical. She was bigger, yes, but she was also sleeker, more muscled. Her horns had begun to emerge, 2 curved ridges above her eyes that caught the moonlight. Her tail was longer, more articulate, and it wrapped around Harry's waist with a possessive grip that said very clearly, "Try to take him again and see what happens." "Nyx," Harry said. "Look," he pointed up. At the sky, at the vast, open, endless sky through the bond. He felt her understand. Her wings quivered, her head tilted back. Her nostrils flared, pulling in the scent of salt and wind and space that went up forever. Fly, fly. She didn't need to be told twice. Nyx launched herself off the hillside with a leap that covered 20 feet, her wings snapping open, catching the wind. She wobbled, listing left, overcorrecting right, and for a terrifying moment Harry thought she'd crash into the cliffside. But then instinct kicked in, a million years of evolutionary memory surging through muscle and bone, and her wings found the rhythm. She flew. Not gracefully, not yet. She was clumsy, unpracticed, fighting the wind more than riding it. But she was flying, her dark wings spread against the stars, her body a streak of obsidian and moonlight, and the sound she made, the sound that burst from her throat, was not a keen or a chirp or a growl. It was a roar. Small, young, rough-edged, but a roar, and it rolled across the Welsh hills like thunder, and somewhere in Harry's chest, the last broken thing clicked into place and he was whole. He stood on the hillside and watched his dragon fly for the first time, and the tears on his face were warm. Griffock stood beside him in silence. When Nyx banked clumsily over the sea and nearly clipped a wave before pulling up with an indignant shriek, the goblin allowed himself a small, fierce smile. "She's going to need practice," Griffock said. "She'll get it." Harry watched Nyx climb higher, spiraling, her wings stronger with every beat. Through the bond he felt what she felt. The wind, the cold, the impossible lightness, the world spreading out below her like a map made of moonlight. Joy, pure, overwhelming, boundless joy. "Tomorrow we begin real training," Griffock said. "Not cupboard lessons, real Dragon Lord training, flying, combat, bond deepening. It will be the hardest thing you've ever done." Harry smiled. It came easier now than it had 3 weeks ago, and it reached his eyes. "Good," he said. "I'm done with easy." High above, Nyx roared again, louder this time, more confident, and the stars shivered and the waves crashed and the night opened wide around them. And 600 miles away, in a castle in Scotland, Albus Dumbledore stood in his office amid the wreckage of a dozen shattered silver instruments and felt, for the first time in a very long time, the cold knife of genuine fear. The boy was gone. The blood wards were broken. And something had just roared in the magical spectrum with a signature that Dumbledore had only ever read about in books so old their pages crumbled at a touch. He reached for the fireplace. Green flames erupted as he threw in a handful of flue powder. "Severus," he said, "come to my office. Now." The flames flickered. A voice, silky and irritated, answered from the other end. "It is 1 a.m, headmaster. Harry Potter has disappeared, and I believe," Dumbledore paused, and when he spoke again the fear was audible, "I believe he may have bonded with a dragon." Silence on the other end, then, very quietly, "I'll be there in 5 minutes. The fire died. Dumbledore stood alone in his office, surrounded by broken instruments and the fading echo of something ancient, and wondered how, in all his careful planning, he had missed this. Chapter 3. The hidden roost. Harry hit the ground for the 14th time that morning and tasted grass and dirt and blood where he'd bitten his tongue. "Again," said Griffock. Harry pushed himself up. His arms shook. His knees were scraped raw through Dudley's old jeans, which he'd been wearing when they'd extracted him, and which were now streaked with mud, grass stains, and what he suspected was dragon saliva. Every muscle in his body ached with a deep, throbbing intensity that the nutrition potions hadn't prepared him for. "The shield needs to be instinctive," Griffock continued, standing 3 feet away with another stone balanced on his palm. "You can't think about it. By the time you think, you're already hit. The bond processes faster than conscious thought. Let it." "I'm trying. Try faster." Griffock threw the stone. Harry reached for the bond. The shield flickered into existence, violet, translucent, and the stone punched through it like paper and caught him square in the chest. He stumbled back, gasping. From the ridge above, Nyx made a sound that was unmistakably laughter. A throaty, rattling chuckle that vibrated through the bond with undisguised amusement. She was sprawled across the hilltop like a cat in a sunbeam, wings draped over the rocks, watching her rider get pummeled by a creature a quarter her size. "Funny," she sent. "It is not funny. Very funny. Small goblin beats you. I could beat small goblin. That's not the point." "It is a little bit the point." Harry wiped blood from his lip and faced Griffock again. The goblin's expression hadn't changed. It never changed during training, locked into a mask of clinical assessment that Harry had learned to read through the smallest tells. A slight narrowing of the eyes meant better. A twitch of the jaw meant worse. Right now, Griffock's left eyebrow was fractionally raised, which meant, "I know you can do this, and I'm going to keep throwing stones until you prove it." "The shield fails because you're constructing it," Griffock said. "Building it piece by piece like stacking bricks." "That's wizard thinking, structured, methodical, slow. Dragonlord magic doesn't work that way. The bond is a current, not a toolkit. You don't build a shield, you become the shield. You let the current flow through you and shape itself around the threat." "That doesn't make any sense." "It will." Again. Another stone. Harry didn't think. He let go, let the bond flood through him the way it did when he was falling asleep, when conscious control softened and Nyx's magic braided with his own in that warm, liquid way that felt like sinking into a hot bath. The shield erupted. Not from his hands, not from a point of focus, but from him, from his skin, his breath, his heartbeat. It shimmered into existence a foot from his body, curved and seamless, and the stone hit it and bounced, ricocheting sideways into the grass with a sound like a bell. Griffock's eyebrow dropped. His jaw unclenched. That was the goblin equivalent of a standing ovation. "Better," he said. Harry stared at his hands. The shield faded, but the feeling lingered, the sense of the bond as a living thing flowing through him like blood, ready to manifest at need. It was fundamentally different from the controlled point-and-push magic he'd been practicing. This was organic, instinctive. Like breathing on the ridge, Nyx raised her head. "Through the bond, yes, like that. Like flying, you don't think about wings. Wings just work." Harry nodded slowly. "Wings just work," he murmured. "What?" said Griffock. "Nothing, throw another one." Griffock threw 3. Harry blocked them all. It had been 4 days since the extraction. 4 days since the hillside, since Nyx's first flight, since the blood wards shattered and Dumbledore's instruments went dark. 4 days in the sanctuary, and Harry was already a different person. Not physically, that would take longer, though Thornwick's potions were working steadily. filling out the gaunt hollows in his face, straightening the bones that had healed crooked, building the muscle that 6 years of malnourishment had denied him. But mentally, emotionally, something had shifted. The constant low-grade fear that had been the background noise of his life at Privet Drive was gone, replaced by something he barely recognized: safety. The sanctuary was everything Gryffok had promised. 100 acres of Welsh coastline, warded and hidden, with a stone cottage nestled in a valley between 2 hills. The cottage was simple: kitchen, sitting room, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with hot water that Harry had spent 20 minutes standing under on the first day, because he'd never had a hot shower that lasted more than 3 minutes at the Dursleys. There were books, shelves of them, magical texts and Muggle novels, and everything in between. There was food, real food, stocked daily by a goblin supply chain that Harry didn't fully understand. There was a bed with actual sheets and a pillow that didn't smell like mildew, and there was space. God, the space. After 6 years in a cupboard, the sanctuary felt like a continent. Harry could walk for an hour and not reach the wards. He could stand on the cliffs and watch the sea crash against the rocks below, wind tearing at his hair, and feel something he'd only ever felt in the brief, stolen moments in the Dursleys' back garden at night: freedom. Nyx was in heaven. The coastal thermals were perfect for a young dragon learning to fly, and she spent hours in the air, banking, diving, climbing, testing the limits of her growing body. She was the size of a small pony now, growing at a rate that Gryffok's records described as accelerated but within historical parameters. Her scales had deepened from obsidian to something richer, a black so dark it seemed to absorb light, with veins of deep violet that pulsed when she channeled magic. Her horns had grown into elegant backward-sweeping curves, and her wingspan, fully extended, was close to 15 feet. She was beautiful. She was terrifying. She was his. Their bond deepened daily. Nyx's communication had evolved from raw emotion and fragmented images into something approaching true telepathy. Not words, exactly, but complex conceptual packages that Harry's brain translated into language. She could convey in a single pulse what would take a paragraph to say aloud. Observations layered with emotional context, memories woven with present sensation, questions that carried their own speculative answers. And the reverse was true. Harry had stopped needing to consciously formulate thoughts for Nyx. She simply knew, the way his left hand knew what his right hand was doing. The shared senses were developing too. Harry could close his eyes and see through Nyx's, the world rendered in thermal gradients and magical currents, a tapestry of heat and power that was dizzyingly different from human vision. He could feel the wind on her wings during flight, the stretch of muscle and membrane, the instinctive calculations of angle and thrust. And when he was afraid or in pain, Nyx felt it instantly, viscerally, as if it were her own. This had nearly caused an incident on the second day, when Harry stubbed his toe on a rock hard enough to draw blood. Nyx, circling 100 feet above, had gone into a screaming dive toward the perceived threat, and Gryffok had to physically wave her off before she cratered the hillside. The protective instinct will intensify as she grows, Gryffok had warned. A mature celestial obsidian's bond response to its rider's pain is extreme. You'll need to learn to modulate what you transmit. How? Practice, stubbed toes, minor injuries. Build up her tolerance for your discomfort without triggering a combat response. You want me to deliberately hurt myself so my dragon doesn't murder a rock. Welcome to Dragonlord training. The training itself was relentless. Gryffok had designed a regimen based on Aldrich's primer and supplemented by goblin martial traditions that predated the wizarding world by millennia. Mornings were physical, running, climbing, exercises that pushed Harry's underdeveloped body to its limits, and then fractionally beyond. Gryffok was merciless about this. A Dragonlord, he explained, couldn't afford to be weak. The bond shared physical sensation. If Harry's body failed, Nyx would feel it, and a dragon distracted by its rider's exhaustion was a dragon vulnerable to attack. Afternoons were magical. Bond work, shield practice, the Embercraft techniques that let Harry channel magic through the bond's passive energy. And increasingly, Gryffok was introducing something new: resonance casting, which Aldrich's primer described as the Dragonlord's primary magical weapon. Unlike wand magic, which imposed the caster's will on reality through a focus, resonance casting used the bond as an amplifier. Harry would form an intent, light, heat, force, and push it through the bond to Nyx, who would amplify it through her own magical core and send it back, supercharged. The result was magic of a power and character that didn't match any known school. Harry had managed resonance casting exactly once, on the third day. He'd been trying to light a campfire and pushed too hard through the bond, and Nyx had amplified a simple warming intent into a column of violet flame that scorched a 10-foot circle of grass to ash and melted the stones Griffook had arranged as a fire ring. "Ah," Griffook had said, surveying the smoking crater, "perhaps we'll work on calibration. Evenings were for study." Griffook would leave at dusk. He had responsibilities at the bank. A senior account manager couldn't vanish indefinitely without raising questions, and Harry would sit by the fire in the cottage with Nyx curled beside him and read. History, magical theory, the primer's increasingly complex chapters on bond evolution and Dragonlord combat techniques. He read voraciously, desperately, making up for 6 years of educational neglect with an intensity that was almost frightening. Nyx, it turned out, like being read to. Not the content, she found human politics tedious and magical theory self-evident, but the sound of Harry's voice, the steady rhythm of words, the warmth of shared attention. She'd rest her head on his lap and close her eyes and make the low, thrumming purr that was her version of contentment, and Harry would read until his voice gave out, and then sit in the quiet with his hand on her scales and feel, with a certainty that was almost painful, that this was what home was supposed to be. On the 5th morning, the visitor arrived. Harry was in the middle of a training exercise, shield maintenance under sustained assault, which meant Griffook was pelting him with charmed pebbles that came from random directions, while Harry tried to keep a 360-degree shield active when Nyx's head snapped up. Someone at the wards. Old. Powerful, not goblin, not the watching one. Harry dropped the shield. Griffook, mid-throw, caught the pebble and went still. "Someone's here," Harry said. "Nyx can feel them at the ward boundary. Description." Harry relayed Nyx's impression. Old, magically powerful, with a signature that tasted of something cold and aristocratic and faintly decaying. Like a grand house slowly crumbling, Griffook's expression shifted. "Ah, he's early. You know who it is?" Director Ragnok invited him. "I was going to brief you tonight, but..." Griffook straightened his coat with a sharp tug. "Harry, you're about to meet Arcturus Black, Lord of the noble and most ancient House of Black, your great-grandfather by blood through your grandmother Doria Potter née Black." Harry stared. "I have a great-grandfather. You have an extensive magical family, most of whom don't know you exist or wish they didn't. Arcturus is the exception. He's the current Lord Black, old, ill, and deeply unhappy with what's become of his family line. Most of the Blacks are dead, imprisoned, or insane. But Arcturus is none of these things." Griffook paused. "He is also extremely dangerous. Do not mistake his age for weakness. Why does Director Ragnok want me to meet him?" "Because you need allies in the wizarding world, and Arcturus Black, whatever his faults, commands political power that even Dumbledore respects. The black seat on the Wisengamot, the black fortune, the black network of alliances and debts. If he supports you, doors open. If he opposes you, doors close and lock. And if he doesn't care, Arcturus Black cares about one thing, the survival and restoration of the House of Black. If you can convince him that your interests align with his, he'll move mountains for you. If you can't, he'll forget you exist." Griffook met Harry's eyes. "Be honest with him. He has no patience for pretense." The wards admitted Arcturus Black at Griffook's command, and Harry watched him approach from the cottage doorway with a knot in his stomach. He was old. That was the first impression, profoundly, architecturally old. The way ancient buildings are old, with the sense that age had not weakened the structure but merely stripped it to its essentials. He was tall and thin, dressed in black robes of severe elegance, and he walked with a silver-headed cane that he clearly didn't need. His hair was white, cropped close, and his face was all bones, sharp cheekbones, a blade of a nose, sunken eyes that burned with a dark intelligence. He looked like what would happen if you distilled aristocracy down to its purest, most concentrated form. Nyx, on the ridge behind the cottage, raised her head and rumbled. Arcturus Black stopped walking. His eyes, grey, pale as winter, fixed on the dragon with an expression that Harry couldn't read. For a long moment the old man simply stood on the hillside, wind pulling at his robes, staring at the creature on the ridge. Then he looked at Harry. The grey eyes swept him, head to toe, missing nothing. Harry felt the assessment like a physical thing, his size, his posture, his clothes, his scar, the quality of his gaze. He resisted the urge to stand straighter and instead met the old man's eyes directly. "You're small," Arcturus said. His voice was dry and precise, each word placed with the care of a man who had never wasted a syllable. "Smaller than a potter should be. I've been told I'm underweight. You've been starved, there's a difference." Arcturus's gaze didn't waver. "You have your mother's eyes." "I met her once, Lily Evans, before she was a potter, at James and her wedding. She told me I looked like a vulture and I told her she was marrying beneath her station. We got on rather well after that." Harry felt something crack in his chest, the way it always did when someone mentioned his parents, a hairline fracture in the wall he'd built around that grief. "You knew them. I knew your father better. James was my great-grandson through Doria, which made him one of the few blacks I could tolerate. Reckless, arrogant, brave to the point of stupidity." A pause. "I was fond of him." The admission seemed to cost the old man something. He turned back to Nyx, who had risen to her full height on the ridge, a silhouette against the grey Welsh sky, wings half spread, watching the stranger with the focused intensity of a predator evaluating a threat. "Celestial obsidian," Arcturus murmured. "I thought the breed was legend." "She's real. Obviously." The dry voice carried a flicker of something that might have been humour. "Does she have a name?" "Nyx." "Appropriate." Arcturus looked at Harry again. "Ragnok tells me you've bonded with her, a full Dragonlord bond." "Yes." "And that you've been living in a muggle cupboard for 6 years, starved and beaten, because Albus Dumbledore decided that blood wards were more important than a child's well-being." "I wouldn't say beaten." "I would. I had my own people investigate the Dursleys the moment Ragnok contacted me." "The neighbours talk, Harry. The teachers at your school talked. Vernon Dursley's colleagues have opinions about his temper that are remarkably candid after a few drinks." Arcturus's voice was flat, controlled, and underneath it, a fury so cold it made Griffooks' anger look like a candle beside a glacier. "I will be dealing with the Dursleys in due course. That is not why I'm here." He walked to a flat rock near the cottage and sat, arranging his robes with automatic precision. He placed his cane across his knees and fixed Harry with that burning, winter-grey gaze. "I am dying," he said. The words fell like stones into water. Harry said nothing. Griffook, standing to the side, said nothing. Nyx on the ridge went very still. A wasting curse, contracted during the First War against Voldemort, slow but inexorable. "My healers give me 3 to 5 years." Arcturus said this without self-pity or drama, the way one might report the weather. "In that time I need to secure the future of the House of Black. I have no suitable heirs. My grandson Sirius is in Azkaban, and no, before you ask, I have my doubts about his guilt, but that's a separate matter. My granddaughter Narcissa married a Malfoy and is effectively lost to me. My granddaughter Bellatrix is in Azkaban and is genuinely insane. My granddaughter Andromeda married a Muggle-born and was disowned, though I've come to believe that was a mistake." He tapped his cane against the rock once, twice. "You, Harry, are the son of my great-grandson James, which makes you a black by blood. You are also, apparently, a Dragonlord, something that hasn't existed in over 1,000 years. And you are the boy who lived, which means the wizarding world will watch everything you do with obsessive fascination." He leaned forward. "I am here because you represent the only chance I have of leaving my family's legacy in capable hands. And I am here because Ragnok assures me you are not an idiot, which puts you ahead of most of my actual family." Harry sat down on the grass across from him. Nyx, sensing no threat from the old man, settled back onto the ridge but kept watching. "What do you want from me?" Harry asked. "I want to teach you. Not magic, the goblins are handling that well enough. Politics, the customs and laws of the wizarding aristocracy, how to navigate the Wisengamot, how to manage a noble house, how to speak to purebloods in their own language, not the spells but the language. The nods and silences and careful words that decide who holds power and who merely has it." Arcturus's eyes were sharp. "You're going to need it. A Dragonlord who doesn't understand politics is a weapon without a wielder, dangerous, unpredictable, and inevitably turned against itself. And in exchange," a thin smile, "in exchange you carry the black name alongside the Potter name. You become my heir not to the exclusion of Sirius if his situation changes, but as the active representative of the House of Black in my absence. You use the political capital I give you to restore the reputation of a family that has been dragged through the mud by its own worst members. I'm 6. You won't be 6 forever, and the foundations of power are laid long before the building is visible. Arcturus studied him. Ragnarok said you'd be direct. I appreciate directness, so I'll be direct in return. I don't care that you're a child, I care that you're capable. The question is whether you are. Harry thought about this. Through the bond, Nyx sent a complex impression, her reading of Arcturus's emotional state, which she could perceive through magical resonance in a way Harry was still learning to interpret. The old man was sincere. His motivation was exactly what he said it was. Legacy, survival, the desperate need to leave something behind that wasn't ash and shame. There was no deception in him. But there was hardness, a core of iron that would not bend, would not compromise, would use Harry ruthlessly if Harry let himself be used. I'll learn from you, Harry said. I want to learn, but I'm not a tool, Lord Black. The goblins have their reasons for helping me, you have yours. Everyone wants something from the Dragon Lord, but I'm not a Dragon Lord first, I'm Harry first, and Harry gets to decide what he does with what he's given. Silence. Arcturus's pale eyes searched his face. Then the old man laughed, a short, sharp bark that sounded rusty from disuse. James's stubbornness and Lily's spine, he said. Yes, you'll do. He stood, retrieving his cane. Lessons begin next week. I'll come to you. This sanctuary is adequate for our purposes, and I have no desire to be seen visiting a location associated with Dragonlord activity. We'll start with the basics, the structure of the Wisengamot, the hierarchy of the noble houses, the current political landscape. He paused. And I'll tell you about your family, both families. The things the goblins can't tell you because they weren't there. Harry's throat tightened. I'd like that. HM. Arcturus turned to leave, then stopped. He looked back at Nyx, who had risen again and was watching him with those green eyes, Harry's eyes, in a dragon's face. Magnificent creature, Arcturus said quietly. Take care of her, she takes care of me, even better. The old man walked to the ward boundary and vanished with a crack of apparition that lingered in the salt air. Griffock let out a breath that Harry suspected the goblin had been holding for 20 minutes. That went better than expected, Griffock said. He's honest. Brutally so. It's one of his few redeeming qualities. Griffock paused. Did you mean what you said, about not being a tool? Harry looked at him steadily. Did I say something wrong? You said exactly the right thing. Arcturus Black doesn't respect deference, he respects backbone. Griffock's thin mouth twitched. And so do goblins. On the ridge, Nyx stretched and launched herself into the sky, catching a thermal and spiralling upward. Through the bond, Harry felt her exhilaration, the sheer physical joy of flight, of muscle and wind and the world shrinking beneath her. He closed his eyes and let himself ride the feeling, seeing the sanctuary from above. The green hills, the cottage, the cliffs, the sea stretching grey and endless to the horizon. His home. His first real home. And slowly, carefully, piece by piece, a family forming around him. Arcturus kept his word. He arrived every Tuesday and Thursday, appearing at the ward boundary precisely at 10 in the morning with the punctuality of a man who considered lateness a moral failing. He brought books, old ones, from the Black family library, bound in leather and stamped with the black crest a shield bearing 2 greyhounds and the motto Tauger's Purr. He brought genealogy charts that unfolded into sprawling family trees connecting every major wizarding house in Britain. And he brought stories. This was what Harry valued most, not the political theory, though he absorbed it diligently, recognizing its importance, but the stories. Arcturus had known everyone. He'd grown up in the golden age of the pureblood aristocracy, had watched the rise of Voldemort, had navigated the First War with the cold pragmatism that was his defining trait. He'd known Harry's grandparents, Fleamont and Euphemia Potter, who had died of dragon pox just before the war's end. He'd known Doria, Harry's great-grandmother, who had been a Black before she married Charles Potter, and who had, according to Arcturus, been the only person in the family with any sense. She saw what the House of Black was becoming. Arcturus said one afternoon, sitting in the cottage kitchen while Harry made tea, a skill he'd had since age 4 thanks to Petunia. The darkness, the obsession with blood purity. She tried to pull us back from the edge, and when she couldn't, she left. married Charles, took the Potter name. I was furious at the time, disowned her. He paused. One of many mistakes. Why did the family follow Voldemort? Fear, ambition, belief. Arcturus sipped his tea. The House of Black has always been susceptible to power. We are drawn to it the way moths are drawn to flame, with similar results. Voldemort offered what every dark pureblood family wanted, a world where their bloodlines ruled without challenge. Some of my family believed in the ideology. Others simply wanted to be on the winning side. And some, Bellatrix primarily, were broken in ways that Voldemort exploited with surgical precision. And Sirius, Arcturus's face changed. Something cracked in the granite, just for a moment, just a flash of raw pain before he locked it down. Sirius was the best of us. Brave, defiant, utterly unwilling to bend to the family's expectations. He ran away from home at 16, went to live with your father's family. I admired him for it, though I never told him so. Arcturus set down his tea. He was convicted of betraying your parents to Voldemort, of murdering 13 people with a single curse. He's been in Azkaban for 5 years. Do you think he did it? I think Sirius Black would have died before betraying James Potter. I think the evidence is damning, but the trial, if there was a trial, which I'm increasingly unsure of, was inadequate. Arcturus's voice was careful. Investigating this is on my list, but it requires resources and influence that I'm still marshalling. Harry filed this away too, Sirius Black. His godfather, named in his parents' will, in prison for a crime that his own grandfather doubted. Tell me about my parents, Harry said. Not the politics, them. Arcturus was quiet for a long time. Then he began talking, and he talked for 2 hours, about James's wild confidence and terrible jokes, about Lily's fierce intelligence and fiercer temper, about the way they'd been together. A unit, a team, complementary in ways that shouldn't have worked but absolutely did. He talked about the wedding, small wartime, held in the Potter family's garden with protective charms layered so thick the flowers bloomed in weird colours. About the first time James had held baby Harry, terrified and delighted in equal measure, and how Lily had laughed and said, "He's not going to break, James." Harry listened with his tea going cold in his hands, and when Arcturus finished, the old man looked at him and said very quietly, "They were extraordinary people, and they loved you more than anything in the world. That should never have been in question." "It wasn't," Harry said. "I just didn't have anyone to tell me." Nyx, lying by the fire, raised her head and placed it on Harry's knee. Through the bond, warmth, solidity, the unshakable assurance that he was loved now, even if the past had been cold. Arcturus watched the dragon with an expression Harry was learning to read, the complicated, layered look of a man reassessing everything he thought he knew. "You really are bonded," he murmured. "Not just magically, emotionally. She feels what you feel, and I feel what she feels. That will make you either the most formidable wizard of your generation or the most vulnerable, probably both." Summer deepened. Harry grew physically, magically, in confidence and knowledge. Thornwick visited weekly, monitoring his recovery with goblin thoroughness, adjusting potions, tracking his growth against the projected curve. Harry gained weight, gained height, gained the healthy colour that 6 years of cupboard living had denied him. His eyes were brighter. His movements were more confident. He stood straighter, not with the rigid posture of someone trying to appear taller, but with the easy balance of a body that was finally being used properly. And Nyx grew faster. By mid-July, 6 weeks after the extraction, she was the size of a horse. Her scales had hardened into true armour, layered plates of obsidian dark chitin that deflected stones and turned aside Gryffindor's test projectiles, with a sound like metal striking metal. Her fire had matured. No longer the uncontrolled bursts of her earliest weeks, but a focused, searing jet that could be modulated from a gentle, warming flame to a torrent of violet-white heat that melted rock. She could fly for hours, riding the coastal thermals with an effortless grace that made Harry's heart ache with pride. She was faster than any bird, more agile than anything her size had a right to be, and when she tucked her wings and dove, the sound she made, a rising, keening scream that split the air, was audible for miles. They flew together for the first time on a Tuesday evening in late July. Gryffindor had been building toward it. The primer described first flight as a pivotal bonding experience, one that required physical readiness on the rider's part and emotional trust on both sides. Harry had been practicing on Nyx's back while she was grounded, learning the seat, the grip, the way to brace himself against the spines that ran along her neck. He'd learned to read her movements, the subtle shifts of muscle and weight that preceded turns, climbs, and dives. Through the bond, he could feel her intentions before she executed them, and she could feel his, but all of that was theory. Flight was something else. "You're sure?" Griffock asked, watching Harry climb onto Nyx's back. The goblin's face was neutral, but his hands were clasped behind his back in the way they always were when he was nervous. "We're sure." Harry settled into position, knees pressed against Nyx's sides, hands gripping the spines at the base of her neck, body leaned forward. Through the bond, Nyx vibrated with anticipation. She'd been waiting for this. They both had ready, born ready, old goblin saying. Heard Griffock use it, Harry smiled. Then let's fly, Nyx crouched, her muscles coiled. Her wings spread wide, 20 feet now, tip to tip, membranes of dark, translucent tissue stretched over bone and sinew. The wind caught them, and Harry felt the lift, the upward pull, the world wanting to let go. She leaped. The ground fell away. Harry's stomach lurched. Wind roared in his ears and tore at his hair, and the world tilted crazily as Nyx's wings beat. Once, twice, 3 times, and they climbed. Harry clung to her spines and fought the instinct to close his eyes and instead looked down, and the sanctuary spread below him like a painting, the green hills and white cliffs and dark sea. And Griffock was a tiny figure on the hillside, getting smaller, and they were flying. They were actually flying through the bond. Nyx's joy hit him like a wave. Not the tentative pleasure of her first solo flights, this was something deeper, something that resonated in the oldest parts of her blood. This was what she was made for, not just flight but shared flight. A rider on her back, a heartbeat against hers, 2 beings moving as one through the sky. Harry leaned into it. He let the bond open fully, let Nyx's senses overlay his own, and the world transformed. He could feel the wind as she felt it, not just on his skin but as a texture, a substance, a living thing that could be read and ridden and shaped. He could feel the thermal beneath them, a column of warm air rising from the sun-baked hillside, and Nyx tilted into it and they spiraled upward without effort, climbing, the world falling away. He laughed. He couldn't help it. The sound was torn from him by the wind and the joy and the sheer, disbelieving wonder of it. He was flying on a dragon, and the sky was endless and the wind was wild and Nyx was roaring beneath him. A sound of pure triumph that shook the clouds. They flew for an hour. Nyx showed him everything, the long, gliding descents where the world rushed past in a blur of green and blue, the steep climbs where gravity pulled at them and the air thinned and the stars, even in daylight, seemed closer. The sharp banks and turns that pressed Harry against her scales with centrifugal force, the breathtaking, terrifying dives where Nyx folded her wings and they plummeted like a stone, wind screaming, ground rushing up. And then snap, wings open. The dive arrested with a force that would have killed a normal human, but that the bond cushioned, absorbing the shock through shared magic. By the time they landed, a controlled descent to the hillside, Nyx's hind legs touching down first, then her forelegs, wings folding with a leathery whisper, Harry was shaking. Not with fear, with emotion so intense it had no name. He slid off Nyx's back and sat on the grass, and she curled around him, and they sat together in the fading light while the sky turned from blue to gold to violet. "So," Griffock said, approaching cautiously. "How was it?" Harry looked up at him. His face was wind-burned, his eyes bright, his smile so wide it ached. "Again," he said. "Tomorrow and the day after and every day after that." Griffock allowed himself a rare, genuine smile, spoken like a dragon lord. Meanwhile, 600 miles away, Albus Dumbledore was running out of patience. He'd sent Severus Snape to Privet Drive the morning after the Blood Wards fell. Snape had found the house empty of Harry. The Dursleys were there, of course, but the boy was gone. Snape had investigated with the thoroughness that made him one of Dumbledore's most valuable assets, and what he'd found had brought him back to the headmaster's office with a report that was unusually terse, even by Snape's standards. The boy lived in a cupboard under the stairs. Snape had said, standing before Dumbledore's desk with his hands clasped and his face a mask. For 6 years, he slept on a stained mattress with no pillow. The door had a latch on the outside. The walls were scratched as if by an animal or a child trying to get out. Dumbledore had been very still. There were burn marks on the stove consistent with a child cooking unsupervised. The boys' school records, which I obtained from the local primary, describe a student who was frequently absent, underweight, and socially withdrawn. No medical records of any kind. No dental records. No record of any adult ever attending a parent-teacher conference on his behalf. Snape's voice was even, controlled, reporting facts without inflection. The neighbours describe him as the Potter boy and say he was rarely seen outside except when doing garden work. One neighbour, a Mrs. Figg, expressed concern for his welfare but stated she had been told by Albus Dumbledore to observe but not intervene. A silence that stretched and stretched. Mrs. Figg reported to me regularly, Dumbledore said. She never indicated. She indicated exactly what you told her to indicate, nothing alarming, nothing that would require action. She was your eyes, headmaster, and you gave her instructions to watch, not to help. That's not, with respect, headmaster, it is precisely what happened. I have spoken to the woman. She is consumed with guilt, which suggests she knew on some level that the situation was worse than she reported. Dumbledore removed his spectacles and pressed his fingers to his eyes. He looked for a moment every one of his considerable years, and the boy, any trace of where he went? None. The magical residue at the house is complicated. The blood ward collapse left interference patterns that make tracking impossible, but there are traces of goblin magic, faint, well concealed but present. Whoever took the boy had goblin assistants. Gringotts. Almost certainly. Dumbledore replaced his spectacles. His blue eyes, usually twinkling, were flat. And the dragon. Snape's jaw tightened. This was the part that neither of them wanted to discuss. The instruments in Dumbledore's office, 3 of which had shattered beyond repair, had registered a magical event at the moment of the ward collapse that didn't match any known phenomenon. A bonding. An ancient, primal magical connection between a human wizard and something enormous, something that resonated at frequencies that modern magic didn't use. Your theory, Snape said. It was not a question. My theory is that the Potter vault in Gringotts contained something I didn't know about. Something the family kept hidden for centuries, and that Harry somehow activated it. Dumbledore's fingers steepled. A Dragonlord bond would explain the readings. It would explain the goblin involvement. The goblins revere the Dragonlord tradition. And it would explain why the boy's magical signature has shifted so dramatically that my instruments can no longer track him. If he's bonded with a dragon, he's beyond your monitoring. He's beyond anyone's monitoring. A Dragonlord bond generates its own ward field, a passive magical interference pattern that scrambles external observation. He could be standing in this office and my instruments wouldn't register him. Dumbledore paused, which means someone is educating him, training him. Shaping the most magically significant child in Britain, and I have no idea who they are or what they're teaching him. You're afraid of him. I'm afraid of what he could become without guidance. Whose guidance? Yours, the question hung in the air. Snape's dark eyes held no warmth. You placed him with those people, headmaster. You placed him with muggles who locked him in a cupboard and burned him on a stove and never once took him to a doctor. You did this in the name of blood protection, of the greater good, and for 5 years you looked away. Snape's voice was still controlled, but something had crept into it, not anger exactly, but a cold, precise contempt that was far more damaging. Lily's son, in a cupboard. The blood wards were a prison for a child who you swore to protect. I did what I believed was necessary. Yes. You always do. Snape turned for the door. I'll continue investigating the goblin connection. But if you find the boy, headmaster, if you somehow locate a child who has bonded with a dragon and been taken in by allies who actually seem to care about his welfare, I'd recommend approaching with a good deal more humility than you've shown to date. The door closed. Dumbledore sat alone in his office, surrounded by broken instruments and Snape's accusations and the terrible, gnawing knowledge that he had made an error. Not a small error, not an understandable error. A catastrophic one, rooted in arrogance and assumption, and the consequences were only beginning to unfold. He pulled a map toward him, a magical map of Britain, enchanted to display concentrations of magical energy. He tapped it with his wand and whispered an incantation that was old enough to creak. The map showed nothing. Where Harry Potter should have been, a bright point of magical light, visible and trackable, there was a blank space. An absence. A hole in the fabric of magical Britain shaped exactly like a missing boy. Dumbledore stared at the blank space for a long time. Then he pulled parchment toward him and began to write letters. To the Ministry, to the Order, to contacts and allies and people who owed him favours. The search for Harry Potter would be quiet, it had to be. A public hunt for the boy who lived would cause panic and attract exactly the kind of attention that served no one. But it would be thorough, he would find the boy. He had to. The prophecy demanded it. The war that was coming, because Dumbledore knew, with the certainty of a man who had spent decades studying the patterns of darkness, that Voldemort was not truly gone, demanded it. And somewhere beneath the certainty, in a place that Dumbledore rarely acknowledged, was something simpler and more human. Guilt. The image of a cupboard with a latch on the outside, a stained mattress, scratched walls. He should have checked, he should have visited. He should have done so many things differently. He wrote faster. The quill scratched against parchment in the silent office, and the broken instruments gleamed like accusations in the candlelight. Back in Wales, Harry knew nothing of Dumbledore's search. But he knew it was coming. Griffock had told him, in the blunt, unvarnished way that goblins delivered bad news. "He'll find you eventually," Griffock said one evening as they sat on the cliff's edge watching Nyx hunt fish in the waters below. She'd discovered that diving into the sea at high speed was both an effective hunting technique and enormously entertaining, and the coast was littered with the remains of her catches. Not the sanctuary, the wards will hold against anything short of a direct goblin breach, and Dumbledore won't risk a diplomatic incident with Gringotts, but he'll find evidence of you. Sightings, magical traces, the inevitable rumours. A dragon the size of a horse doesn't stay secret forever. How long? Months, maybe a year if we're careful. The sanctuary's isolation helps, but Nyx needs to fly, and a flying dragon is visible. We've placed Notice Me Not charms on the airspace, but those have limits. So we prepare. When Dumbledore comes, and he will come, you need to be ready to face him. Not fight him. You can't fight Albus Dumbledore, he's the most powerful wizard alive, and even a Dragonlord bond won't close that gap for years. But you can face him, you can stand your ground. You can make it clear that you are not a chess piece to be moved at his convenience. Harry watched Nyx burst from the water with a salmon in her jaws, wings scattering spray like diamonds in the sunset light. Through the bond, her triumph was a hot, bright pulse. "Caught it, see, I caught it. Are you watching?" "I'm watching," Harry called. "Well done," she preened, circling back for another dive. Harry shook his head, smiling, and turned back to Griffock. "What about the other threat?" "The one you haven't told me about." Griffock went still. The wind pulled at his coat, and the silence stretched long enough that Harry knew he'd hit something. "What makes you think there's another threat?" "Because you've doubled my training intensity in the last week." "Because Director Ragnarok visited 3 days ago and spent an hour in private conversation with you that you haven't briefed me on." "Because Arcturus arrived yesterday with 2 books on magical combat that weren't on any syllabus." Harry met the goblin's eyes. "I'm 6, not stupid." Griffock was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. He handed it to Harry. It was a surveillance report, written in the cramped, precise script of a goblin intelligence operative. Harry's reading had improved enormously, another benefit of Griffock's education, and he passed it quickly. The report described a woman. Selena Voss, age 34, British-born, educated at Beauxbatons rather than Hogwarts. Formerly employed by the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures at the British Ministry of Magic. Dismissed 6 years ago, under unclear circumstances. Now operating as an independent dealer in magical creatures, primarily rare and illegal species, sold to wealthy collectors and researchers through a network of intermediaries. The report described her connections. A consortium of old pureblood families, not Death Eaters, not Voldemort's people, but a quieter, more pragmatic network of wealthy traditionalists who collected magical power the way Muggles collected art. Families who understood that a dragon, a real dragon, not the wild, uncontrollable breeds in Romania, but a bonded celestial obsidian, was worth more than gold. The report described recent activity. Selena Voss had been seen in Wales. She'd been asking questions in the magical communities along the coast, questions about unusual sightings, strange weather patterns, unexplained magical signatures. She'd been spending gold freely, buying information, and her trail was converging on the stretch of coast where the sanctuary sat. She doesn't know exactly where we are, Griffox said. The wards prevent that, but she knows we are here or near here. The dragon sightings have narrowed her search area. It's only a matter of time before she gets close enough to detect the ward boundary, and once she does, she'll know something is being hidden. Who is she? Dangerous, competent, well-funded. She has her own beliefs about dragon lords. I haven't been able to determine the full picture, but her dismissal from the ministry was related to a classified incident involving a dragon breeding program. The details are sealed, but my sources suggest she was trying to recreate the Dragon Lord bond artificially. It didn't work. People died. Griffox's voice was grim. She's not a fanatic. She's worse. She's rational. She understands exactly what a Dragon Lord represents, and she's decided that the power is too dangerous to be left in uncontrolled hands. She wants to control me. She wants to control Nyx. You're secondary. The consortium she works for wants the dragon, not the boy. A celestial obsidian, even unbonded, would be the most valuable magical creature on Earth. Bonded, it's a weapon, and weapons in the wrong hands. I'm not a weapon. No, but Nyx is, to people who don't understand the bond. They think the dragon can be separated from you, rebonded, controlled. They're wrong. The bond is unbreakable, but they don't believe that, and they're willing to hurt you to test their theory. Harry looked at the report again. Selena Voss stared up at him from a small, grainy photograph. A woman with sharp features, dark hair, and eyes that held an intelligence he recognized. Not cruel eyes, calculating ones, the eyes of someone who had weighed the moral cost of what she was doing and decided it was acceptable. When will she find us? Harry asked. Weeks, maybe less if she has help I don't know about. Then we have weeks to prepare. You keep saying prepare as if preparation is a solution. It's not. Preparation is what you do when the solution isn't clear. Griffox took the report back. The solution, Harry, is to become strong enough that Selena Voss and her consortium look at you and decide the cost of taking you on is too high. I'm 6. With a dragon, and a goblin nation behind you, and a dying Lord Black who is, even now, mobilizing political resources on your behalf. And a magical heritage that predates the ministry itself. Griffox's dark eyes burned. You are not as small as you think, Harry Potter. On the cliff below, Nyx launched from the water with another fish, roaring her small roar, and the sound echoed off the Welsh cliffs and out to sea. Harry listened. Through the bond, he felt Nyx's fierce, uncomplicated joy, the joy of a creature doing what it was born to do, strong and free and unafraid. He wanted to feel that way too. He was working on it. That night, after Griffox left and Arcturus's latest books had been stacked on the cottage shelf and Nyx had curled by the fire with her tail wrapped around Harry's waist, Harry opened the Dragon Lord primer to a chapter he'd been avoiding, on combat. Aldrich's writing was different here, blunter, less philosophical, the prose of a man who had fought and killed and didn't romanticize it. The Dragon Lord is not a soldier. The Dragon Lord is a force. In battle, the bond becomes a weapon, not through the dragon's fire or the rider's spells, but through their unity. A Dragon Lord in combat is 2 minds sharing one purpose, 2 magical cores resonating at a single frequency. The result is a harmonic amplification that exceeds the sum of its parts by an order of magnitude. This is why Dragon Lords were feared. Not because we were powerful, though we were, but because our power was integrated. A wizard casts a spell. A dragon breathes fire. A Dragon Lord does both, simultaneously, through a bond that operates faster than thought. There is no defense against a perfectly coordinated Dragon Lord attack, because the attack comes from 2 sources, through 2 modalities at the speed of instinct. But this power comes at a cost. The bond shares pain. If the dragon is wounded, the rider feels it. If the rider is struck, the dragon responds. In the heat of combat, this feedback loop can spiral, pain triggering protective rage leading to reckless action leading to more pain. The untrained Dragon Lord is as dangerous to himself as to his enemies. Therefore, control. The Dragon Lord must learn to manage the feedback loop, to feel the pain without being consumed by it, to channel the dragon's protective instinct without losing strategic awareness. This is the hardest skill a Dragon Lord can learn, and the most important. Without it, the first serious injury in combat will send both dragon and rider into a spiral that ends in death. Harry read the passage twice, then closed the book. Nix, who had been following along through the bond, shifted beside him, afraid, a little. I will not let them hurt you. I know, but that's the problem, isn't it? If someone hurts me, you'll lose control trying to protect me, and if you lose control, we're both vulnerable. Nix was quiet for a moment. Then, through the bond, she sensed something more complex than she'd ever communicated before, a layered, nuanced concept that Harry's mind translated slowly, like a difficult passage in a foreign language. It was a promise. Not the simple mind-protect-all ways of her earlier bonding, but something deeper and more mature. A recognition that protection wasn't just about fire and fury, it was about discipline, about choosing the right moment to strike and the harder moment to hold back. About trusting Harry to survive even when every instinct screamed to intervene. It was, Harry realized with a start, the first time Nix had shown him something approaching wisdom. She was growing up, they both were. We'll learn together, Harry said, the way we learn everything together. Nix rumbled her agreement, and the fire crackled, and outside the cottage, the wind off the sea carried the smell of salt and wildflowers and the faintest trace of something else. Something on the wind that tasted like the future, vast and uncertain, and full of teeth. Harry banked the fire and they slept, dragon and dragonlord curled together in a cottage on a cliff at the edge of the world. Tomorrow training, tomorrow growth, tomorrow another step toward becoming whatever they were meant to become, but tonight they rested. And the wards hummed around them like a heartbeat, steady and strong, holding the darkness at bay. For now. Chapter 4. Old Blood, New Fire. 2 years changed everything. Harry Potter was 8 years old, and if Vernon Dursley had seen him standing on the Welsh cliffside that October morning, he wouldn't have recognized the boy he'd locked under the stairs. Harry had grown 5 inches and gained nearly 2 stone of lean, functional muscle. His hair was still black and untamable, his eyes still that sharp, startling green behind round glasses, though the glasses were new now, proper ones, fitted by a goblin optician who'd muttered darkly about the muggle prescription Harry had been wearing. His face had lost the pinched, hollow quality of malnourishment and settled into something that Arcturus said was distressingly like James, but with Lily's jaw. He stood at the cliff's edge in the grey morning light, arms loose at his sides, watching the sea. Behind him, the sanctuary spread in its familiar geometry, the cottage, the hills, the forest, the training grounds that Griffith had expanded twice as Harry's abilities grew. Above him, lost in the low cloud cover, Nix circled. She was enormous. The small, cat-sized hatchling that had pressed her head against a crying boy's chest in a goblin vault was gone. In her place was a dragon the size of a large horse, 12 feet from nose to tail, with a wingspan that had surpassed 30 feet and was still growing. Her scales were a masterwork of evolutionary design. Layered obsidian plates that shifted between pure black and deep violet depending on the light, harder than steel, warm to the touch with the internal furnace that powered her fire. Her horns had grown into sweeping, elegant curves that framed a head that was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying, angular, intelligent, with jaws that could crush stone and eyes that held a depth of awareness that made most humans deeply uncomfortable. She was, by any measure, the most dangerous creature in the British Isles. She was also, at this particular moment, trying to catch a seagull that was being extremely uncooperative. "Hold still, you ridiculous bird. Leave the seagull alone, Nix." It looked at me disrespectfully. It's a seagull. It looks at everything disrespectfully. That's what seagulls do. Then seagulls should accept the consequences. Harry shook his head, a smile pulling at his mouth. Through the bond, Nix's frustration was almost comically intense. She was an apex predator, a creature of ancient and terrible power, and this stupid bird kept dodging her. He could feel her wings adjusting, feel the calculations running through her instincts, and he could also feel the moment she gave up and banked away with a huff of violet-tinged smoke. Seagulls are beneath me anyway. Obviously. She dropped through the clouds and landed on the cliffside with a ground-shaking thump, folding her wings with the crisp precision she'd developed over 2 years of daily flight. Her head swung toward Harry, and those green eyes, still his green, always his green, studied him with the mix of affection and assessment that was pure Nix. "You're brooding." "I'm not brooding. I'm thinking." "You're standing on a cliff staring at the sea with a serious expression. That's brooding." "I've read about it. You can't read. You read to me, I absorb. There's a difference. She lowered her head to his level and her breath, warm, smelling faintly of fish and ozone, washed over him. What are you thinking about? Harry placed his hand on her snout. The scales were warm, thrumming with the slow pulse of her magic. Through the bond, he could feel the depth of her, not just her physical presence, but the vast, interconnected architecture of her magical core. At 2 years old, Nyx's magic was already staggering. It moved through her like a tidal force, far more power than she could currently channel, growing every day. Griffith said Selena Voss was spotted in Pembrokeshire last week. That's 30 miles south. Nyx's eyes narrowed. Her tail, thick as a tree trunk, swept sideways across the cliff grass. The hunter woman, the one who wants to cage me. She doesn't want to cage you, she wants to take you from me. There's a difference. Not to me there isn't, fair point. Harry scratched the ridge above her left eye, her favourite spot, one that made her rumble deep in her chest and half close her eyes. Even at her current size, she was still a creature that melted at a well-placed scratch. She's getting closer. The wards are holding, but Griffith's intelligence says she's hired a tracker, a specialist, someone who can detect ward boundaries through resonance mapping. If the tracker finds the boundary, Voss will know exactly where we are. Then we stop the tracker. We can't just eat everyone who threatens us, Nyx. I wasn't suggesting eating. I was suggesting strongly encouraging them to leave. A pause with fire. That's the same thing. It is absolutely not the same thing. Eating is consumption, fire is communication. Harry laughed despite himself. Nyx's sense of humour had developed alongside her intelligence, and it ran toward the dry and the threatening in a way that Arcturus found delightful and Griffith found concerning. We'll talk to Griffith about it tonight. He's bringing someone, a new trainer, he said. Someone who specialises in combat applications of bond magic. Another goblin, he didn't say. Nyx huffed. Goblins are acceptable, small but acceptable. If it's a wizard, I reserve judgment. You reserve judgment on everyone, because everyone must earn it. She lifted her head and looked out to sea. Through the bond, Harry felt the shift in her attention from playful to serious, the way a predator's awareness sharpens when something moves at the edge of perception. The hunter woman, when she comes, not if, when, what will you do? Harry looked out at the sea with her. The question had been turning in his mind for weeks, sharpened by Griffith's increasingly urgent briefings and Arcturus's pointed lessons in strategic thinking. I'll give her a chance to walk away, Harry said. And if she doesn't take it, I'll show her why she should have. Nyx's approval rolled through the bond like a wave of dark heat. Good, that is the Dragon Lord's way. Mercy first. Then fire. They stood together on the cliff, boy and dragon, watching the horizon. Somewhere beyond it, Selena Voss was closing in. Somewhere beyond it, Dumbledore was searching. The world was tightening around the sanctuary like a fist, and Harry could feel it, the invisible pressure of converging threats, the narrowing window of safety. But he was not the boy who'd cowered in a cupboard. Not anymore. Griffith arrived at dusk, and he wasn't alone. The trainer was not a goblin. He was not, strictly speaking, anything Harry had encountered before. He stood just inside the ward boundary. The wards had admitted him, which meant Griffith had keyed him in, and he was tall. Taller than any wizard Harry had met, with a lean, rangy build that spoke of a life lived in motion. His skin was dark brown, his head was shaved, and his eyes were the colour of hammered gold. He wore travelling clothes, leather jacket, heavy boots, trousers that had seen better decades, and he carried no one that Harry could see. Instead, a pair of curved blades hung at his hips in worn leather sheaths, and his hands were covered in thin scars, the kind that came from a lifetime of handling things with edges. But the thing Harry noticed most was the man's magical signature. Through the bond, with the heightened perception that Nyx's magic granted him, Harry could read magical auras the way most people read facial expressions. This man's aura was unlike anything he'd encountered. It wasn't the structured, disciplined signature of a trained wizard, or the deep, geological power of a goblin. It was wild, layered, as if several different types of magic had been braided together into something that shouldn't work but did. Nyx raised her head and studied the stranger with predatory focus. Through the bond, interesting, he smells like fire, not dragon fire, older. The man looked up at Nyx. His expression didn't change, no fear, no awe, just a calm, evaluative attention that matched the dragon's own. Celestial obsidian, he said. His voice was deep, accented, West African maybe, though Harry wasn't sure. Haven't seen one in person, smaller than the text suggest. She's 2 years old, Harry said. I know, she'll triple in size by maturity. The man's golden eyes shifted to Harry. You're the rider, Harry Potter. I know that too. He walked forward unhurried and stopped 10 feet from Harry. Up close, the scars on his hands were more visible, burns, cuts, what looked like claw marks. This was a man who had been near dragons before. My name is Kofi Asant. Griffock hired me to teach you combat magic. You're not a goblin. Observant. No, I'm a wandless combat specialist, trained in Ghana, the Ashanti tradition which doesn't use wands and never has. Spent 15 years working with the Romanian dragon reserves, which is where I learned how dragon magic interfaces with human magic. He glanced at Nyx again. Also where I got most of these scars. Romanian longhorns are not gentle. Why did Griffock choose you? Because I'm the best wandless combat instructor alive, and because I have practical experience with dragon-bonded magic that no one else does. The Romanian reserves attempted a partial bonding program 20 years ago. Nothing like a true Dragon Lord bond, more of a magical attunement between handlers and their dragons. It failed eventually, but I learned more about the interface between dragon magic and human magic during that program than any wizard in history. You failed. Kofi's mouth twitched. I failed at creating an artificial bond. No one can create what you have. It's organic, genetic, rooted in a bloodline that's been cultivating the capacity for a millennium. But the partial bonding taught me the principles, how dragon magic amplifies human intent, how the feedback loop works in combat, how to channel without burning out. He paused, and how to fight when everything goes wrong and the bond is screaming and your dragon is hurt and every instinct you have is telling you to lose control. That got Harry's attention. The primer's chapter on combat had haunted him, the feedback loop, the spiral of pain and rage, the danger of an untrained response. Every training session with Griffock had circled around the same problem. Harry could shield, he could channel, he could even strike with resonance-amplified magic. But he hadn't been tested, not really, not in conditions that approximated actual danger. Griffock said I needed combat training, Harry said. He didn't say I needed a combat teacher. Griffock can teach you many things. He can't teach you how to fight with a dragon because he's never done it. Kofi unclasped one of his blades and held it up. The metal gleamed with an inner light, enchanted, Harry realized, woven with magic so tightly that the blade itself was a spell. I can teach you, but I should warn you, my methods are not gentle. I don't believe in gentle when it comes to combat. Gentle gets people killed. I wasn't raised gently, so I've heard. Kofi's golden eyes held his for a long moment, then he sheathed the blade and extended his hand. Shall we begin? Harry shook it. Kofi's grip was firm, dry, and covered in calluses. Nyx lowered her head and sniffed the man from crown to boots. Through the bond, her assessment arrived in layers. Competent, dangerous, honest, carries old pain that he hides well, respects us, does not fear us. He'll do, she concluded. Kofi Asant spent 3 hours that first evening destroying everything Harry thought he knew about magical combat. The session started simply. Kofi stood across from Harry on the training grounds, a flat stretch of grass between 2 hills that Griffock had warded to contain stray magic, and said, "Attack me." Harry attacked. He drew on the bond, shaped a pulse of force magic, and sent it at Kofi's chest. It was fast, well-aimed, and powered by 2 years of daily practice. Kofi sidestepped it without appearing to move. The magic sailed past him and detonated against the hillside, gouging a crater the size of a dustbin. Again, Harry tried a different approach, a wide-angle push harder to dodge. Kofi dropped to one knee and the magic passed over his head. He was up again before Harry could adjust, closer now, inside Harry's comfortable range. "You're casting like a wizard," Kofi said. "Point and shoot. The bond gives you more options than that. Use them." Harry reached deeper into the bond. Nyx, watching from the hillside, fed him her perception, the thermal overlay, the magical currents, the subtle tells in Kofi's body language that predicted his next movement. Harry could see through Nyx's eyes, the way Kofi's weight shifted a fraction of a second before he moved. He timed his next strike to that shift. Kofi blocked it, not with a shield, with his hand. He caught the pulse of magic in his palm and it dissipated against his skin like water on hot stone. His scarred fingers glowed briefly with absorbed energy. Better. but you're still thinking sequentially. Cast, observe, adjust, cast again. That's too slow. The bond operates in parallel. You can perceive and act simultaneously through different channels. Try, Harry tried. He pushed perception through Nyx while channeling magic through his own core, attempting to observe and strike at the same moment. It was like trying to rub his stomach and pat his head, possible in theory, disorienting in practice. His strike went wide. His perception blurred. He stumbled. Kofi closed the distance and tapped him on the forehead with 2 fingers. Dead. That's not fair. Combat isn't fair. Combat is fast, confusing, painful, and terrifying, and the person who handles those conditions best is the person who walks away. You have an extraordinary advantage, a dragon bond that gives you 2 perspectives, 2 magical cores, and a communication channel faster than thought. But you're not using it. You're using the bond for strength, not for speed. You hit hard, Harry. But in a real fight, the hard hitter loses to the fast thinker. They went again, and again, and again. Kofi was tireless, his movements fluid, and his magical defense was something Harry had never encountered. A style that absorbed incoming magic rather than blocking it, turning the attacker's power into fuel for counterattacks. By the end of 3 hours, Harry was bruised, exhausted, and had not landed a single clean hit, but he'd learned something. In the last exchange, he'd managed for about 3 seconds to maintain dual-channel awareness, perceiving through Nyx while casting through himself. In those 3 seconds, the world had opened up. He'd seen Kofi's movement before it happened, tracked the flow of magic through the man's body, and identified the gap in his defense, a fraction of a second during the absorption technique when Kofi's guard shifted. He hadn't been fast enough to exploit it, but he'd seen it, and Kofi had seen him see it. There, Kofi said, and for the first time something like approval crossed his face. That moment, that's what we're building toward. When you can sustain that awareness for minutes instead of seconds, you'll be formidable. Harry lay on the grass, staring at the darkening sky. Every muscle ached. Through the bond, Nyx sent him warmth and sympathy and a faint undercurrent of amusement at his exhaustion. The Scarman is good. He's better than good. He's terrifying. Terrifying is what we need. The hunter woman will not be gentle. No, she won't. Kofi became a fixture at the sanctuary. He came 3 times a week, arriving at dawn and staying until dusk, and the training he imposed made Gringotts' regimen look like a holiday. Physical conditioning intensified. Running became sprinting. Climbing became climbing under magical duress, and the shield exercises evolved into full-contact sparring where Kofi tested Harry's defenses with attacks of escalating creativity and violence. But the real work was the bond combat. Kofi had studied the Dragon Lord tradition from the outside, through the Romanian program, through ancient texts, through his own intuitive understanding of how magic flowed between bonded beings. And he brought a perspective that neither Gringotts' Goblin scholarship nor Aldrich's primer could provide. The perspective of someone who had fought alongside dragons and understood the chaos of real combat. The primer assumes a trained adult rider on a fully mature dragon. Kofi said one afternoon, after a session that had left Harry with a spectacular bruise on his shoulder and a much better understanding of magical evasion. You're an 8-year-old on a 2-year-old dragon. The techniques won't work as written. We need to adapt. How? By playing to your strengths instead of compensating for your weaknesses. You're small, that's a weakness in direct confrontation but an advantage in evasion. Nyx is young, she can't overpower a mature dragon or a powerful wizard, but she's faster and more agile than anything her size. And the bond is fresh, still developing, which means it's flexible in ways an established bond isn't. An older Dragon Lord's bond is like a highway, fast, efficient, but fixed. Yours is like water, it goes where you need it to go if you learn to direct the flow. The training sessions began to include Nyx directly. Kofi would stand on the ground while Harry rode Nyx in aerial maneuvers, diving, banking, climbing, and fire enchanted targets at them. The targets were non-lethal but painful, charmed to sting like a wasp on contact, and Nyx took enormous personal offense at being stung. The first time a target hit her flank, she screamed, and Harry felt the pain lance through the bond like a hot wire. His vision went white. The feedback loop kicked in, Nyx's pain triggering his protective response, his distress amplifying her rage, and for 5 horrible seconds he lost control. Nyx dove at Kofi with murder in her eyes and fire building in her throat, and Harry had to wrench the bond with everything he had, pouring calm through the connection like water on flame. Stop. Nyx, stop, he's not the enemy. She pulled up 10 feet from Kofi, wings beating furiously, smoke streaming from her nostrils. Kofi hadn't moved. He stood with his arms at his sides, golden eyes steady, and waited until Nyx's breathing slowed. That, Kofi said, is exactly what will get you both killed. I know. The loop triggered in under a second. You lost rational control for 5 seconds. In combat, 5 seconds is an eternity. Someone could kill you 3 times over in 5 seconds. I know. Then we train it out of you, again. They went again and again. Kofi hit them with targets that stung and sparked and burned, and each time the loop triggered. And each time Harry fought it, fought the instinct to rage, to protect, to burn, and brought Nyx back from the edge. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Not the magic, not the physical strain, but the emotional discipline of feeling Nyx's pain and choosing to think instead of react. After 2 weeks, the loop control time dropped from 5 seconds to 3. After a month, it was under a second. After 6 weeks, Harry could absorb a hit through the bond, feel the sting, acknowledge it, dismiss it without losing awareness. He could feel Nyx's flash of rage and meet it with calm, channeling her protective instinct into focused aggression rather than blind fury. It wasn't perfect. Kofi said it wouldn't be, not for years, but it was enough to survive, enough to fight. The rest of Harry's life continued around the combat training with its own rhythms and demands. Arcturus came twice a week, unfailing, and their lessons had evolved from basic political theory into something more personal and more dangerous. You are, whether you like it or not, the heir to 2 noble houses. Arcturus said one Thursday afternoon, seated in his customary chair by the fire while Harry sat across from him and Nyx sprawled across the cottage floor, taking up most of the available space. The House of Potter, the House of Black. Both come with seats on the Wisengamot, both come with wealth, and both come with enemies, the Malfoys. Among others, Lucius Malfoy married my granddaughter Narcissa, which makes him family, distantly, regrettably. He's positioned himself as the de facto leader of the old pureblood faction since Voldemort's fall. Publicly, he claims to have been under the imperious curse during the war, forced to serve against his will. Privately, everyone knows he was a willing participant who bought his freedom with gold and political favours. Arcturus's lip curled. He's intelligent, well-connected, and completely without principles. He'll oppose you on instinct. A Potter Black Dragon Lord threatens everything he's built. What about the other families? Mixed. The Longbottoms will be sympathetic. Augusta Longbottom was close to your parents, and her grandson Neville is your age. The Bones family is neutral but fair. Amelia Bones runs the DMLE, and she's one of the few ministry officials I'd trust with a sharp object. The Greengrasses will wait and see. The Knots and Crabs are Malfoy's creatures. The Weasleys are poor but decent, which means they'll be decent to you and poor at helping you politically. Harry absorbed this the way he absorbed everything Arcturus taught him, carefully, critically, filing names and relationships into the mental map he was building of the wizarding world he would soon enter. And Dumbledore, Arcturus was quiet for a moment. The fire crackled. Dumbledore is not your enemy, Harry. I know Griffock presents him that way. Goblins have reasons to distrust him, and they're not wrong. But Albus Dumbledore is not a villain. He's a man who has carried the weight of the wizarding world on his shoulders for 50 years, and who has made decisions, some good, some catastrophic, from a place of genuine concern for the greater good. Arcturus paused. The problem with the greater good is that it requires someone to decide what the greater good is, and Dumbledore has decided that he is the one to do so. That arrogance, not malice, is his flaw. He put me in a cupboard. He put you with the Dursleys. He may not have known about the cupboard. I suspect, though I can't prove, that he checked on you less than he should have and trusted more than he should have. The blood wards were real and necessary. They protected you from Voldemort's remaining followers, who would have killed you in your crib if they'd found you. But the execution was, Arcturus chose his word carefully, negligent. Is there a difference between negligence and cruelty? To the victim? No. To the perpetrator? Yes, and it matters because when you meet Dumbledore, and you will, you need to understand who you're facing, not a monster. A man who believes he's right. That's harder to fight than evil, Harry. Evil is simple. Certainty is complicated. Harry thought about this long after Arcturus left. The old man's perspective was different from Griffook's, more nuanced, less angry, informed by decades of navigating the same political waters that Dumbledore swam in. It didn't excuse what had happened. Nothing would. But it gave Harry something he needed. A way to think about Dumbledore that wasn't purely adversarial. He would need that when the time came. October turned bitter. The Welsh coast was beautiful in its autumn violence, storms rolling in from the Atlantic, waves smashing the cliffs, wind tearing at the hills with a ferocity that Nyx adored. She developed a habit of flying into storms, riding the turbulence with a whooping joy that transmitted through the bond as pure, electric exhilaration. Harry, clinging to her back during one particularly savage squall, had to admit that storm flying was the most terrifying and most thrilling experience of his life. "You're going to get struck by lightning," he shouted over the wind. "Lightning is slow, I am not. That's not how lightning works. Everything is how I say it works when I am the one flying." A bolt cracked the sky 100 yards to their left, and Nyx banked hard, laughing through the bond, a deep, reverberating amusement that made Harry's teeth rattle. He held on and laughed too, because what else could you do when your dragon was playing chicken with a thunderstorm? They landed soaked, wind-blown and grinning, or in Nyx's case, making the expression that served as a grin, which involved a lot of teeth and was deeply unsettling to anyone who wasn't Harry. Griffook met them at the cottage with news that wiped the grin off Harry's face. "The tracker found the ward boundary," Griffook said. 2 hours ago, a woman, human not goblin, approached the eastern perimeter with resonance mapping equipment. She spent 40 minutes scanning before withdrawing. Harry's stomach dropped. Beside him, Nyx's scales darkened. "She knows we're here. She knows something is here. The wards are opaque, she can detect the boundary but not what's inside. But the boundary itself is informative. The ward signature is goblin, which tells her Gringotts is involved. The strength of the wards tells her whatever's inside is valuable, and the location matches the dragon sighting pattern she's been tracking for months." Griffook's face was grim. "Selena Voss will move quickly now. Days, not weeks. What's her play? Unknown. She can't breach the wards directly, they'd need a goblin war team to crack, and she doesn't have access to one. But she doesn't need to breach them, she just needs to draw you out." "How?" "By making the sanctuary untenable. The wards protect against intrusion, not against siege. She could disrupt the supply chain. Our deliveries come through goblin couriers, and those couriers travel through unprotected territory. She could escalate to the ministry. An anonymous tip about an illegal dragon being housed on the Welsh coast would bring auras, and while they can't breach goblin wards, the political fallout would be enormous. Or she could simply wait and watch, building intelligence until she finds a weakness." Harry paced. Nyx tracked him with her eyes, her tail sweeping slowly across the floor. "Or," Harry said, "I could go to her." Griffook's expression went flat. "No, not to fight, to talk. She's rational, you said that yourself. She has beliefs about dragon lords, about the danger they represent. Maybe she's wrong. Maybe she can be shown she's wrong. Or maybe she's right, and the moment you leave the wards, she puts a tracking curse on you and follows you back. We don't know what she'll do because we haven't talked to her. We've been reacting, hiding, preparing, building defenses. But we haven't tried the simplest thing, asking her what she actually wants." Griffook stared at him. "You sound like Arcturus." "I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't one, but the goblin's expression was calculating. If you go out there, if you meet her, you'd need to be prepared for the possibility that talking fails. I'd have Nyx. Nyx can't come. A dragon appearing in the Welsh countryside would blow every secrecy protocol we've maintained. You'd need to go alone." Through the bond, Nyx's reaction was immediate and violent. "No, you do not go without me, not into danger, not toward the hunter-woman, I will not allow it." "Nyx, I am not debating this. The bond exists for a reason, we face threats together or not at all." Harry looked at Griffook. Griffook looked at Harry. Both of them knew that arguing with a 2-year-old celestial obsidian was roughly as productive as arguing with a mountain. "Concealment," Harry said. "If I can conceal her—" "She's the size of a horse, Harry. The concealment charms have gotten stronger. The bond channels more power now. I've been working on layered notice-me-nots, multiple overlapping fields that reinforce each other. Kofi tested them last week. He said they were strong enough to hide a dragon in broad daylight, as long as she doesn't do anything dramatic. Define dramatic. Roar, breathe fire, eat someone. So everything Nyx enjoys doing. Through the bond, Nyx huffed indignantly, I have self-control. Sometimes, when I choose, the plan came together over 2 days. Griffook, reluctant but practical, agreed that a meeting with Voss was preferable to waiting for her to escalate. Kofi was consulted and added his own conditions. Harry would carry a recall stone, a goblin emergency portkey that would yank him back to the sanctuary at a touch. And Nyx would be concealed but present, airborne, close enough to intervene in seconds. Arcturus, when informed, had a different concern entirely. What will you say to her? The old man asked, his grey eyes sharp. I'll listen first, find out what she wants. She wants the dragon. She wants to control the threat she perceives. That's different if I can show her I'm not a threat. You are a threat, Harry. A dragon lord is, by definition, a destabilizing force in the current magical order. The question isn't whether you're a threat. The question is whether you're a threat to her. And if I'm not, then she might back off. Or she might decide you're a threat to her employers instead, which amounts to the same thing. Arcturus tapped his cane against the floor. Be careful. Selena Voss is not a thug. She's an idealist, the most dangerous kind of enemy. She believes she's right, and she has the intelligence and resources to act on that belief. Harry nodded. He'd thought about this. He'd thought about little else for 2 days. I'll be careful, he said, but I won't be afraid. He went on a Thursday morning. The meeting point was a stretch of moorland 3 miles south of the sanctuary, outside the wards. Exposed. Chosen because the open terrain made ambush difficult and gave Nyx clear airspace. Harry walked there through the autumn chill, the heather crunching under his boots, the recall stone warm in his pocket. Above, invisible behind layers of concealment magic, Nyx circled at 500 feet. The bond hummed between them, taut, alert, ready. Nyx was barely holding herself together. Every instinct she had screamed against this, against her rider walking into danger, exposed, vulnerable. Harry could feel her control fraying at the edges, the protective fury bubbling just beneath the surface. If she hurts you, if she even I know, but let me try. Please. A shudder through the bond. Then, with visible effort, I trust you. But my trust has a very short fuse today. Noted, she was already there. Selena Voss stood in the centre of the moor, and Harry's first thought was that she looked exactly like her photograph, and nothing like it at all. The photograph had captured her features, sharp, precise, framed by dark hair cut short, but it hadn't captured her presence. She stood with the easy confidence of a woman who had been in dangerous situations before and come out the other side, and her dark eyes tracked Harry's approach with an intelligence that was almost physical in its intensity. She wore practical clothes, dark jacket, boots, travelling trousers. No robes, no one visible, though Harry's bond-enhanced perception detected one, holstered on her right forearm under the jacket sleeve, a quick-draw rig. Professional, she also had 2 companions. They stood 20 feet behind her, a man and a woman, both in dark clothes, both armed, both radiating the tightly controlled magical signatures of trained combat specialists, bodyguards or mercenaries. Harry had expected something like this. He stopped 30 feet from Voss. The wind pulled at his hair. Above, Nyx adjusted her circling pattern, tightening, ready. Harry Potter, Voss said. Her voice was lower than he'd expected, with a clarity that cut through the wind. You're younger than I thought. I'm 8. I know how old you are. I know quite a lot about you, actually. The goblin connection, the black patronage, the dragon lord bond. She tilted her head. I also know you've been training with Kofi Asant, which tells me you're not stupid. Kofi doesn't work with amateurs. You know Kofi. We worked together at the Romanian reserves, before my career took a different turn. A pause. I assume you know what that turn was. The artificial bonding program, the one that failed, people died. Something flickered across her face, not guilt exactly, but an acknowledgement of cost. 3 people, all volunteers, all fully informed of the risks. The program was attempting to replicate the Dragon Lord bond through magical engineering to create a controlled interface between dragon and human magic. We believed it could be done safely. We were wrong. And now you're hunting me. I'm not hunting you, Harry. I'm trying to prevent a catastrophe. She took a step forward. Her bodyguards mirrored her. Do more actions, write the next chapter now. Chapter 5. The Weight of Wings. Harry was 10 years old the first time he saw Hogwarts. Not in person, not yet. In a photograph. Arcturus brought it, tucked inside a leather folio along with the formal enrollment letter that had arrived by owl post at the Black family residence. The photograph showed the castle from across the lake, its towers and turrets reflected in black water, and even flat and two-dimensional the place seemed to breathe. Your parents walked those halls, Arcturus said. He was thinner now. The wasting curse had carved hollows beneath his cheekbones and stolen the iron from his posture. He still refused the cane on good days, but good days were fewer. James was Gryffindor. Lily was Gryffindor. Every Potter in living memory has been Gryffindor. And you want me in Slytherin? I want you wherever you'll be most effective. Slytherin would give you access to the pureblood networks. Ravenclaw would give you intellectual credibility and distance from the political houses. Gryffindor would make you a symbol, which is useful but constraining. Arcturus studied him. Where do you want to be? Harry looked at the photograph. Through the bond, Nyx stirred on the hillside outside, a vast, lazy shifting of obsidian scales in the February rain. She was enormous. 4 years had turned the cat-sized hatchling into something mythic. 25 feet from nose to tail. 60 feet of wingspan, scales like layered night, shot through with veins of deep violet that pulsed when she channeled magic. Horns that swept back from her skull in elegant curves, fire that could melt granite. She was the most powerful single creature in magical Britain, and she was currently using that power to try to catch raindrops on her tongue. Stop judging me. Rain tastes interesting. I'm not judging. You're smirking. I can feel you smirking through the bond. Harry turned back to Arcturus. I want to be where I can learn the most, and where I can be myself, not the boy who lived, not the Dragon Lord, just Harry. That may not be possible. You are the boy who lived. You are a Dragon Lord. Pretending otherwise doesn't change reality, it just leaves you unprepared for it. I'm not pretending. I'm prioritizing. The politics, the titles, the power, that's all real and I'll deal with it. But I'm 10. I want to go to school and learn magic and maybe make a friend who isn't a goblin, an 80-year-old man, or a dragon with an attitude problem. I heard that. You were meant to. Arcturus's mouth twitched. It was the closest he came to a smile these days. The curse had dulled even that, muting his expressions the way it muted everything, slowly draining the colour from a man who had once commanded rooms with a glance. The letter raises practical concerns, Arcturus said. Hogwarts enrollment triggers automatic notification to the Ministry. The moment you respond, you become visible. Dumbledore will know. Dumbledore already knows I exist. He's been looking for 4 years. He knows you exist. He doesn't know what you've become. The moment he finds out, everything changes. Arcturus leaned forward and the effort it cost him was visible. You need to meet him before Hogwarts, on your terms, not his. If he encounters you for the first time at the sorting in front of the entire school with no warning, he'll react, and Dumbledore's reactions tend to reshape the landscape. Harry nodded. He'd been thinking the same thing. Through the bond, Nyx sent agreement, not in words but in a tactical assessment that overlaid his own. Confrontation on their terms, controlled ground, clear objectives, and if the old wizard tries to take you from me, nobody takes me from you, ever. Good, then I won't have to eat him, Nyx. I said I won't have to. Not that I won't want to. The weeks between February and summer unfolded with a gathering intensity, like a storm building over the sea. Harry trained harder than ever. Kofi's combat sessions had evolved into full-scale tactical exercises that used the entire sanctuary as a battleground, with Gryffindor providing intelligence and Nyx providing air support. They drilled scenarios: ambush response, siege defense, extraction under fire. Kofi pushed Harry to the edge of his limits and then nudged him past. You're ready for anything a student might face at Hogwarts, Kofi said one evening, watching Harry hold a triple-layered shield against a sustained barrage of spellfire. You're ready for most things an adult might face. But you're not ready for Dumbledore. I'm not planning to fight Dumbledore. Plans change. Fights happen. And Albus Dumbledore, whatever his flaws, is the most dangerous combat wizard alive. I've seen him duel once during a conference in Geneva. He dismantled 3 trained auras in under 10 seconds without appearing to move. His magic doesn't operate by the rules we teach. It operates by the rules he writes. Kofi sheathed his practice blades. If it comes to a fight, and I pray it doesn't, your only advantage is the bond. Dumbledore has never faced a Dragon Lord. He won't know the patterns, the rhythms, the way the magic flows between you and Nyx. That unfamiliarity is your edge. Use it. By not fighting like a Dragon Lord, Kofi blinked. Then he grinned, a rare, bright expression that transformed his stern face. By fighting like a Dragon Lord who knows he's facing a genius, unpredictable, fluid, never where he expects you to be. Harry filed it away. He filed everything away. 4 years of training had given him a mind like a vault, organized, deep, capable of retrieving any piece of information at need. He wasn't a prodigy. Griffith and Kofi both agreed on that. He was something arguably more useful, a dedicated student with a dragon bond that amplified his abilities, and a work ethic born from 6 years of being told he was worthless. He didn't have Dumbledore's raw talent. He didn't need it. He had preparation, and preparation, Arcturus always said, was the weapon that never misfired. Spring brought something unexpected, a breakthrough in the bond. Harry was sitting by the fire one evening in late March, reading a text on advanced ward theory that Griffith had assigned, when Nyx curled outside the cottage, too large to fit through the door by a wide margin, sent him something through the bond that stopped him mid-sentence. An image. But not a vague impression or an emotional snapshot, a fully formed, high-resolution image, clear as a photograph. The view from 500 feet. The sanctuary laid out below, every detail sharp, the cottage a tiny square of warm light, the cliffs silver in the moonlight, the sea stretching dark to the horizon. Nyx was seeing, and Harry was seeing what Nyx saw, and the two perspectives, his own eyes on the page, her eyes on the sky, coexisted in his mind without conflict. Then she sent another image. Herself from the outside, as she'd seen herself reflected in the sea during a low pass. A massive, dark shape against the water, wings spread, beautiful and terrible. This is what I am, she sent, not the concept. The words, full articulated words transmitted through the bond with perfect clarity. This is what we are, see us. Harry's breath caught. Nyx, you just spoke, yes. I have been practicing. A pause laden with the particular smugness that was uniquely Nyx. Did you think you were the only one who trains? How long have you been able to do this? The words have been forming for months. They required precision. I did not want my first true sentence to you to be about seagulls or fish. Another pause, although I have many opinions about seagulls. Harry laughed, and it cracked at the edges because this was monumental. The primer described verbal bond communication as a milestone that most historical dragon lords didn't reach until years into their partnership. The bond between him and Nyx was maturing faster than any recorded precedent. You're crying, Nyx observed. A little. Humans cry when they are happy. This remains confusing to me. It means I'm proud of you. A flood of warmth through the bond, vast, deep, unmistakably love, though Nyx would never use that word, and I of you, always. They sat together in the spring night, Harry inside, Nyx outside, the cottage wall between them and the bond making it irrelevant, and talked. Really talked for the first time, not in impressions or emotions or fragmented concepts, but in words. Nyx's voice through the bond was unlike anything Harry had imagined, not human, not animal, but something else entirely. Deep, resonant, with a cadence that reflected her dragon nature, thoughts that spiraled and circled rather than running in straight lines, observations that layered multiple perspectives simultaneously, humor that was dry and dark and unexpectedly tender. They talked about the sanctuary, about training, about the coming confrontation with Dumbledore, about what Hogwarts would be like and whether the other students would be terrified of her, certainly, and whether she could eat Draco Malfoy if he turned out to be as unpleasant as Arcturus suggested, regretfully, no. They talked about flying, and the way the wind tasted at different altitudes, and the strange, ancient dreams Nyx sometimes had, dreams of other dragons, other skies, memories that might have been genetic echoes of her species' long history. And they talked about fear. You are afraid of Hogwarts, Nyx said, not an accusation, an observation, not afraid, anxious, there's a difference. Explain the difference. Fear is about threat, anxiety is about uncertainty. Hogwarts isn't dangerous, not in the way Voss was dangerous, but it's unknown. I've never been around other children. I've never been in a social environment. The training, the politics, the combat, I can handle all of that. but sitting in a classroom with 30 other kids who have grown up in the magical world, who have parents and friends and normal lives. Harry trailed off. I don't know how to be normal, Nyx. You are not normal, you are a dragon lord, normal is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant to me. Nyx was quiet for a moment, then, with unexpected gentleness, you want to belong. This is the thing the cupboard people stole from you. Not magic, not family belonging. The sense of being part of something without having to earn it. Harry swallowed hard. 4 years of growth, 4 years of training and learning and becoming something extraordinary, and Nyx could still cut through all of it to the core of him with a single observation. Yes, he said. That's exactly it. Then you will find it. Not because you are powerful or important or because you have a dragon, because you are kind and curious, and you laugh at things that aren't funny, and you talk to seagulls, and you cry when you're proud of me. These are the things that make humans love each other. I have watched. I have studied. A pause. I am an expert on humans now. You've met about 6 humans total, quality over quantity. And 5 of those 6 care about you deeply, which suggests you are worth caring about. The 6th was the hunter woman, and she was simply wrong. Harry pressed his hand against the cottage wall, feeling the faintest vibration of Nyx's breathing on the other side. Through the bond, her certainty was absolute, not the fierce, protective certainty of their early days, but something more mature. Faith. Not in his power or his training, but in him. Thank you, he said. You are welcome. Now go to sleep. You have combat training at dawn, and Kofi will make you run if you yawn. Kofi makes me run regardless. Then yawning will make him make you run more. Sleep. Harry slept. And for the first time in weeks, the anxiety about Hogwarts loosened its grip, just slightly, and his dreams were of open skies and a dragon's voice saying words he'd waited his whole life to hear. The confrontation with Dumbledore came in June, 2 months before the start of term, and it came on Harry's terms. He'd planned it carefully, with Griffook's strategic input, Arcturus's political guidance, and Kofi's tactical assessment. The meeting would take place on neutral ground. A chamber in Gringotts, deep enough to be secure, goblin-controlled, with Ragnarok's personal guarantee of safe passage for all parties. Harry sent the invitation through formal channels. A letter, penned in the precise calligraphy Arcturus had taught him, delivered to Hogwarts by Goblin Courier, addressed to Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, Supreme Mugwort, Chief Warlock of the Wisengamot, Headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The letter was 3 sentences long. Headmaster Dumbledore, I am Harry James Potter. I understand you have been looking for me. I propose we meet. Dumbledore's reply came within hours. 1 word in elegant script, where Harry told him. The Gringotts chamber was circular, carved from white stone, lit by floating orbs that cast a warm, steady light. A round table sat in the centre, deliberate, Ragnarok had explained, because round tables had no head, no position of authority. Equal footing. Harry arrived first. He wore clothes that Arcturus had selected, not robes, but well-fitted muggle trousers and a dark jacket over a white shirt, simple and deliberate. The boy who lived meets the headmaster, and he's not even wearing wizard clothes. Every detail was a message. Griffook stood behind Harry's chair, formal and still. Ragnarok stood by the door, arms folded, radiating the particular menace that goblin directors deployed like a weapon. Kofi was not present. His role was combat, not diplomacy, but Arcturus was, seated to Harry's right, thin and pale and burning with the intensity of a man who knew his time was short. They waited. The door opened at exactly the appointed time, and Albus Dumbledore walked in. Harry had seen photographs. He'd read descriptions. He'd built a mental model of the man from Griffook's briefings, Arcturus's stories, and Kofi's grudging respect. None of it had prepared him for the reality. Dumbledore was tall, taller than Harry expected, and old in the way that ancient trees are old, with a sense of depth and root structure that went far below the visible surface. His beard was silver-white, long enough to tuck into his belt, and his robes were a deep midnight blue embroidered with tiny silver stars. His half-moon spectacles sat on a nose that had been broken at least twice, and behind them his eyes were blue, a vivid, piercing blue that seemed to see through surfaces into the machinery beneath. He moved like a man with nothing to prove. No urgency. No display. Just a calm, scented presence that filled the room the way water fills a glass. Behind him, half a step back, was another man, Black robes, black hair, black eyes. Everything about Severus Snape was monochromatic, drawn in sharp lines. He was younger than Harry expected, mid-30s at most, but he carried himself like someone who'd been old for a long time. His face was pale, angular, dominated by a hooked nose and a mouth that seemed designed for sneering. His eyes swept the room in a single pass, cataloguing everything, dismissing nothing. Dumbledore's gaze found Harry, and the blue eyes widened just slightly, just for a moment. Whatever the old wizard had expected, it wasn't what he found. Not a traumatized child, not a bewildered orphan. A composed 10-year-old who met his gaze without flinching, seated at a round table in a goblin bank, flanked by a goblin senior manager and a dying Lord Black. "Harry," Dumbledore said. His voice was warm, gentle, and carried an undertone of something that might have been relief. "You look well." Headmaster Dumbledore, Professor Snape. Harry didn't stand. Arcturus had been specific about this. Standing was deference, sitting was equality. "Thank you for coming, please sit." Something flickered in Dumbledore's eyes. He sat. Snape remained standing for a beat, studying Harry with an intensity that felt like a physical weight, then took the chair beside Dumbledore. "I've been looking for you for 4 years," Dumbledore said. No preamble, no small talk. Harry appreciated that. "I know. I was concerned." "Were you concerned when you placed me with the Dursleys?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Snape's expression didn't change, but something tightened around his eyes. Dumbledore's face went very still. "The Blood Wards," Dumbledore began, "protected me from external magical threats." "Yes," Gryffindor explained the theory. "Ancient protective magic, powered by the sacrifice of my mother's love, anchored in the blood I share with my mother's sister." Harry kept his voice level. "The Blood Wards did not protect me from Vernon Dursley's fists, Petunia Dursley's cruelty, or the cupboard under the stairs where I slept for 6 years." Silence. "I have been told," Dumbledore said carefully, "about the conditions of your upbringing. I did not know. I should have. I accept responsibility for that failure. Professor Snape investigated the house after I left. He told you what he found." Dumbledore glanced at Snape, who met his look with flat, black eyes that offered nothing. "Severus's report was illuminating." Dumbledore's voice was quieter now. "And deeply troubling. I made assumptions about the Dursleys that were not warranted. I trusted Petunia Dursley because she was Lily's sister, and I believed that blood would ensure, if not love, then at least basic care. I was wrong. You were negligent." The word hung in the air. Arcturus, beside Harry, was motionless, watching Dumbledore the way a hawk watches a snake, with complete attention and zero sympathy. Dumbledore removed his spectacles and pressed his fingers to his eyes. When he replaced them, he looked older, genuinely older, the age showing through the composed exterior like cracks in a dam. "Yes," he said, "I was negligent, and I am sorry, Harry, truly sorry." Harry let the apology sit. He didn't accept it, he didn't reject it. He let it exist in the space between them, weighed and measured and set aside for later consideration. "I didn't invite you here to discuss the Dursleys," Harry said. "I invited you here because I'm coming to Hogwarts in September, and there are things you need to know before I arrive." "Things such as?" Harry looked at Gryffindor. The goblin nodded. "I'm a dragon lord," Harry said. "I have bonded with a celestial obsidian dragon named Nyx. She's 4 years old, 25 feet long, and she will be accompanying me to Hogwarts." The silence that followed was so complete that Harry could hear Ragnok breathing by the door. Dumbledore stared at him. The blue eyes, which had been gentle and remorseful, sharpened into something entirely different, the gaze of a man whose mind was running calculations at a speed that most humans couldn't comprehend. Harry watched the thoughts cascade behind those eyes. Surprise, followed by rapid assessment, followed by a dozen strategic recalibrations, followed by something that looked almost like fear. Snape, to his left, had gone perfectly still. His pale face was a mask, but his hands, clasped on the table, had whitened at the knuckles. "A dragon lord," Dumbledore repeated. His voice was very controlled. "The egg was in the Potter family vault, placed there by Aldrich Potter over 1,000 years ago. I found it when I was 6. The bond is fully established." "That's not possible. Dragon Lord bonds require a genetic predisposition carried in the Potter bloodline, activated by a surge of accidental magic in proximity to a compatible egg. The theory is documented in Aldrich's personal writings, which are in my possession." Harry paused. With respect, Headmaster, I've been living with this bond for 4 years. I'm not asking you to believe it's possible. I'm telling you it's real. Dumbledore's gaze moved to Arcturus. You've been involved in this. Since the boy was 6, Arcturus confirmed. Along with Gringotts, which has provided protection, education, and resources. You hid him from me. I kept him safe. There's a difference. Safe. Dumbledore's voice was mild, but the mildness was deceptive, the calm before the storm, the silk over steel. You took a child from the protection of blood wards and placed him under goblin custody without informing anyone, not the ministry, not his magical guardian. You are not his magical guardian, Arcturus interrupted, his voice cutting like a blade. You never were. The Potter's will, which you sealed Albus, which you prevented from being executed, named Sirius Black as Harry's guardian. Failing Sirius, Alice Longbottom. Failing Alice, myself. The will explicitly prohibited placement with Petunia Dursley. You overrode the wishes of the dead to serve your own strategic purposes, and you call it guardianship. Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but something shifted beneath it, a tectonic movement, deep and dangerous. The will was sealed for Harry's protection. Sirius Black had been convicted of betraying the Potters. Alice Longbottom was incapacitated, and you, Arcturus, had family members who were active Death Eaters. The blood wards were the safest option available. The safest option was a cupboard under the stairs. I did not know. You chose not to know. There is a difference, and it is the difference between negligence and complicity. The temperature in the room dropped. Not literally, but the tension between Arcturus and Dumbledore was a physical force, 2 immense wills pressing against each other. Harry felt it through his magical senses like pressure in his ears. Enough, Harry said. Both men looked at him. Snape, who had been watching the exchange with an unreadable expression, shifted his gaze to Harry as well. This isn't why we're here, Harry said. We can argue about the past until we're all dead, and none of it changes what happened. I lived in a cupboard. Dumbledore didn't check. The will was sealed. All of that is real, and all of it matters, and none of it is the point of this meeting. He let the silence hold for a moment. Through the bond, Nyx was alert. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could feel his emotional state, and she was ready. Not aggressive, not afraid. Ready. I'm coming to Hogwarts in September, Harry continued. I'm coming because I want to learn, and because Hogwarts is where I belong. But I'm not coming as a ward of Albus Dumbledore. I'm coming as the head of House Potter, the heir of House Black, and a Dragon Lord. Nyx will be with me. Not in the castle, she's too large, and I'm not unreasonable, but on the grounds. She needs space, and she needs to be near me. The bond doesn't tolerate extended separation. The Hogwarts grounds are home to students, Harry. A dragon will behave. Nyx is not a wild dragon. She's bonded, intelligent, and under my direction. She won't harm anyone who doesn't threaten me. And if someone does threaten you, a schoolyard scuffle, a hex from a classmate, then I handle it. I've been training for 4 years. I can distinguish between a childish hex and a genuine threat, and so can Nyx. Harry met Dumbledore's eyes. I'm not asking for permission, Headmaster. I'm informing you out of courtesy and respect for the institution you run. Nyx is part of me. Where I go, she goes. The question is whether we arrive as allies or adversaries. Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. The blue eyes studied Harry with a depth of attention that most people would have found unbearable, the gaze of a man who had looked into the hearts of thousands of students, who could read character and intention the way ordinary people read newsprint. Harry held the gaze and let himself be read. He had nothing to hide. You're remarkable, Dumbledore said finally, and it wasn't flattery, it was assessment. What you've become in 4 years without any guidance from the institutions that should have supported you. The Goblins, Arcturus, whoever else has been involved, they've done extraordinary work. They gave me a chance, I did the work. Yes, I believe you did. Dumbledore folded his hands on the table. Harry, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Ask. Do you know about the prophecy? The word landed differently than Harry expected. He'd heard it before. Griffock had mentioned it in passing, and Arcturus had alluded to it, but neither had given him details. It was a gap in his knowledge, and he'd been aware of it, and the fact that Dumbledore was raising it now, in this moment, told him it was important. I know there is one, Harry said. I don't know what it says. Dumbledore nodded slowly. He glanced at Snape, a look that carried weight, history, something complicated and painful, and then back to Harry. A prophecy was made before your birth. It concerns you and Lord Voldemort. It is the reason Voldemort targeted your family. It is the reason your parents are dead. And it is the reason I placed you with the Dursleys, not simply for the blood wards, but because I believed you needed to be shielded, kept away from the magical world until you were old enough to bear the weight of what you would eventually have to face. Tell me the prophecy. Not today. The prophecy is a burden, Harry, and I will not place it on your shoulders in a negotiation room surrounded by political allies. You deserve to hear it in private when you're ready with the full context I can provide. Dumbledore's voice was gentle but firm. What I will tell you is this: Voldemort is not dead. He was destroyed, yes, his body, his power, his followers' morale, but the thing that made Tom Riddle truly dangerous, his soul, his will, his genius for dark magic, survived. He will return. It may take years, it may take decades, but he will return, and when he does, the prophecy says you will be the one to face him. The room was very quiet. I know you don't trust me, Dumbledore continued. You have every reason not to. I failed you in the most fundamental way a guardian can fail a child, but I am asking you to believe that my concern for you, however badly I've expressed it, is genuine. Voldemort's return is not a possibility I can ignore, and a Dragon Lord— he paused. A Dragon Lord changes everything. For better or worse. Harry absorbed this. Through the bond, Nyx was motionless, listening through his emotions, processing at the speed of dragon thought. Her assessment came in layers. The old wizard is telling the truth. He is afraid. His fear is not of you, it is for you. He has made terrible mistakes and he knows it. He is trying to do better. Whether he can is an open question. I'll come to Hogwarts, Harry said. Nyx will be on the grounds. I'll meet with you privately to discuss the prophecy after I've settled in, after I've had time to assess the school and the situation. Not before, he paused. And Headmaster, I'm not your weapon. I'm not your chess piece. If Voldemort returns, I'll face him. Not because a prophecy says so, but because he murdered my parents and I will not let that stand. But I'll face him on my terms, with my dragon in my way, not yours. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then, very slowly, he nodded. On your terms, he said. I can accept that. One more thing. Harry turned to Snape. The dark-haired professor had been silent throughout the entire meeting, watching with those flat black eyes, and Harry had felt the weight of his attention like a hand on his shoulder. Professor Snape, you investigated the Dursleys. You saw the cupboard. You reported it honestly, even though it reflected badly on the headmaster. Snape's expression didn't change. I reported what I found. Thank you. Something flickered in Snape's eyes, fast, gone before Harry could identify it. The professor inclined his head a fraction of an inch. You have your mother's eyes, Snape said. It was the first personal thing he'd said in the entire meeting, and his voice, stripped of its usual silky control, held something that Harry didn't understand but recognized. Loss. So I'm told, Harry said quietly. The meeting ended. Dumbledore and Snape left through the Gringotts corridors, escorted by Ragnar's guards. As the door closed behind them, Arcturus let out a breath that seemed to empty him. Well, the old man said, that was rather well done. He agreed too easily. He agreed because he had no choice. You hold the cards, Harry, the dragon, the political standing, the Goblin alliance. Dumbledore is a chess player, and he knows when the board has shifted against him. He'll adapt. He'll find new angles, new ways to influence the situation. But for now, you've established yourself as an equal, not a pawn. Arcturus paused. Your father would have been proud. Harry's throat tightened. Would he? James Potter faced Voldemort 3 times and survived. He defied Dumbledore when he thought Dumbledore was wrong. He was stubborn, principled, and completely unwilling to let anyone else decide his fate. Arcturus's grey eyes softened. You're his son, every inch of you. Through the bond, Nyx sent a pulse of warmth so fierce it made Harry's eyes sting. He blinked it back, nodded, and stood. September. He said, let's get ready. The summer passed in a blur of preparation. Harry's training shifted focus from pure combat to practical wizarding skills, the kind of magic he'd be expected to perform at Hogwarts, adapted through the lens of his Dragon Lord abilities. Griffock obtained a wand for him, a formal requirement for Hogwarts, even though Harry's bond magic didn't need one. Ollivanders was out of the question, the wandmaker reported to Dumbledore. Instead, Griffock arranged a session with a goblin wandsmith, a grey-haired craftsman named Silverfang who worked in the deep forges beneath Gringotts. crafting wands from materials that wand lore purists would have considered heretical. The wand that chose Harry was 11 inches of black ironwood, cored with a fragment of Nyx's first shed scale. It was warm to the touch, resonant with the bond's frequency, and when Harry cast through it for the first time, the spell, a simple lumos, erupted in violet light that filled the forging chamber and made Silverfang step back. It amplifies the bond, Silverfang said, examining the wand with grudging approval. The scale core creates a secondary channel, wand magic filtered through Dragonlord resonance. Unprecedented. The spells you cast through this wand will be different. Different how? Stronger. Less predictable. The bond will colour every spell, not just in power but in character. Your magic will feel different to other wizards. They'll notice. The old goblin shrugged. Then again, you have a dragon. They were going to notice anyway. Harry practiced with the wand throughout July and August, integrating it into his existing magical repertoire. The primer's techniques didn't use wands, but the wand added a dimension he hadn't had, a precision tool for the structured, formalized magic that Hogwarts taught. It was like learning to write with a pen after years of painting with his hands. Both were valid, but the pen allowed finesse that fingers couldn't match. He also prepared for something that no amount of training could address, being a child among children. Arcturus helped with the social preparation, drilling Harry on the names, families, and likely attitudes of his future classmates. Harry would know the Malfoy heir Draco, spoiled, dangerous father, the Longbottom heir Neville, shy, powerful grandmother, the Weasley children many, poor, fiercely loyal, the Bones niece Susan, connected to the DMLE, and a dozen others. He would know who to trust cautiously, who to avoid, and who to watch. But knowing about people was different from knowing how to be around them, and Harry felt the gap like a missing tooth. He'd never had a friend his own age, never played a game that wasn't solitary. Never had a conversation with another child that wasn't Dudley's fist meeting his arm. The closest thing he had to a peer relationship was Nyx, and Nyx was a dragon. "I am an excellent peer," Nyx said when he voiced this concern. "I am supportive, intellectually stimulating, and I only threaten to eat people who deserve it. You threatened to eat Griffook last week because he brought the wrong kind of fish. He brought mackerel. I specifically requested salmon. Violence was warranted." "It really wasn't. Agree to disagree." September 1st arrived with a grey dawn and a sky full of low clouds, and Harry stood on the Welsh cliffside for the last time and looked at the sanctuary that had been his home for 4 years. The cottage sat in its valley, smoke curling from the chimney. The training ground stretched between the hills, scarred and scorched from 1,000 sessions. The cliffs dropped to the sea, which crashed and foamed and went on forever. This place had saved him, had made him, had taken a broken, starving child and given him space to become something extraordinary. He was going to miss it terribly. Nyx landed beside him with a ground-shaking impact, folding her wings against her flanks. She was magnificent in the morning light, dark and vast and thrumming with power. Every inch the apex predator her species had been designed to be. But she pressed her enormous head against Harry's side with the gentleness of the cat-sized hatchling she'd once been, and through the bond her voice was soft, scared, terrified. "Good, fear keeps you sharp. A pause, I'm also terrified, but if you tell anyone I will deny it." Harry pressed his forehead against her snout. Her scales were warm, her breath smelled of the sea. "Together," he said, "always. Now and forever and until the last star goes dark." "That's dramatic. I am a dragon. We invented dramatic." Griffook appeared at the ward boundary. He was dressed in his finest, a formal coat of dark leather with silver clasps, his account manager's insignia gleaming. Behind him, a goblin carriage waited, enchanted, invisible to muggles, drawn by the strowls that stamped and tossed their skeletal heads. "The train leaves at 11. Griffook said, "You'll arrive at King's Cross by 10. The carriage will take you to London and I'll accompany you to the platform. And Nyx will fly. The concealment charms are layered and tested. She'll follow the carriage at altitude and peel off to approach Hogwarts from the north once you're on the train. By the time you arrive at the school, she'll be on the grounds." Harry looked at Nyx. She looked at him. "Try not to eat any seagulls on the way," he said. "No promises." King's Cross station was chaos. Muggle chaos first, the roar of commuters, the rattle of trains, the vast iron and glass cathedral of the main terminal. And then magical chaos as Harry approached the barrier between platforms 9 and 10 with Griffock concealed beside him, invisible to Muggle eyes under a goblin glamour. The trunk was new, dark leather, enchanted to be featherless, containing everything Harry needed for his first year. Books, robes, potions, supplies. The Dragon Lord primer, hidden in a compartment only he could open. The ironwood wand in a holster on his forearm, under his jacket sleeve, Kofi's influence, the quick-draw habit too ingrained to abandon. He pushed through the barrier and emerged onto platform 9 3/4, and the magical world hit him like a wave. The Hogwarts Express was a scarlet steam engine belching white smoke into the enchanted ceiling. The platform was packed with families, witches and wizards in robes, children in school uniforms, owls hooting, cats weaving between legs, trunks stacked and floating. The noise was enormous. The energy was electric. Everyone was talking, shouting, laughing, crying, saying goodbye. Harry stood at the edge of it all and felt his heart hammering. I'm above you, Nick sent from 2,000 feet. I can see the train, I can see you. You are the small one standing very still while everyone moves around you. Thanks for that, you need to move. Board the train. Find a compartment, sit down, breathe, a pause. This is what I told myself before my first flight. It works for dragons. It should work for dragon lords. Harry moved. He navigated the crowd, drawing looks, though not yet recognition. His scar was hidden under his fringe, and without it he was just another first year, and found a compartment near the back of the train. He stowed his trunk, sat by the window and breathed. Griffock was gone. The goblin had said his goodbyes at the barrier, with a formality that almost disguised the emotion beneath. You are the finest student I have ever taught, Griffock had said, his dark eyes bright. Make us proud, Harry Potter. And if anyone gives you trouble, the full resources of Gringotts are a communication stone away. Harry had gripped the goblin's hand hard and said, Thank you, for everything, for the cupboard night and every night after. Griffock had nodded, turned, and walked away fast enough that Harry pretended not to notice the goblin's hand swipe across his eyes. Now he sat alone in the compartment, and the train hadn't left yet, and the adventure was beginning, and he was terrified, and he was ready. The compartment door slid open. A boy stood there, tall for 11, gangly, with a long nose and a face full of freckles, and hair so red it was almost orange. He was wearing hand-me-down robes that were slightly too short and slightly too worn, and he had a smudge of something on his nose, and he looked as nervous as Harry felt. Anyone sitting here? The boy asked. Everywhere else is full. Go ahead. The boy sat down across from him, shoved a battered trunk under the seat and exhaled. I'm Ron Weasley. Weasley. One of the names on Arcturus's list. Poor but decent, fiercely loyal. Harry let none of this show. Harry Potter. Ron's eyes went wide. His gaze flicked to Harry's forehead, looking for the scar, and Harry, who had expected this, pushed his fringe aside and showed it to him. Better to get it over with. Bloody hell, Ron breathed. Everyone's been looking for you for years. Mum said you'd vanished. Dumbledore didn't know where you were. It was all over the Prophet. I've been around, Harry said. Just not where anyone was looking. Where were you? Wales, mostly. Wales, what's in Wales? Harry almost said my dragon and managed barely to redirect. Training. I was being educated privately. Blimey. Ron leaned back, staring at him with undisguised fascination. And now you're coming to Hogwarts just like that. That's mental, that's absolutely mental. Ron shook his head. I've got 5 brothers who have all gone to Hogwarts. Bill, Charlie, Percy, and the twins, Fred and George. They're mental too, in a different way. I'm the 6th Weasley son. Everything I own is second-hand. He said this without bitterness, but with the matter-of-fact resignation of someone who'd long since accepted his lot. Mum cried at the platform. She always cries, even with the twins, and they set fire to her curtains. Harry smiled. Ron was easy to like, open, unguarded, wearing his emotions on his second-hand sleeve. After 4 years of goblins and aristocrats and combat mages, the boy's straightforward humanity was almost startling. I don't have any brothers, Harry said. Or sisters, or parents, so you've got me beat. Ron blinked, then he grinned, wide, genuine, a little lopsided. Suppose I do. Do you want a chocolate frog? I've got one, just one mind. Mum packed corned beef sandwiches, but I hate corned beef. They shared the chocolate frog. The train pulled out of King's Cross. London fell away behind them. and England unrolled outside the window like a green carpet. Fields, farms, villages, the slow transition from city to country. Ron talked about Quidditch obsessively, about his brothers affectionately, about his rat Scabbers who was sleeping in his pocket and looked, to Harry's Bond-enhanced perception, distinctly wrong, though he couldn't place why. Harry listened and asked questions, and found himself doing something he'd never done before, making a friend. The compartment door opened again an hour into the journey. A girl this time, bushy brown hair, large front teeth, already wearing her Hogwarts robes, carrying a book and radiating an intensity that reminded Harry of Griffook. "Have either of you seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one." "No," Ron said. "I'm Hermione Granger, by the way." She looked at Harry. "And you are Harry Potter." Her eyes went huge. "I've read about you, in Rise and Fall of the Dark Arts and Great Wizarding Events of the 20th Century, and none of those books are accurate," Harry said, not unkindly. "I've read them too, they're mostly speculation." Hermione's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She was not accustomed to being told her books were wrong. "Well, what actually happened then? That's a long story. Want to sit down?" She sat. Ron looked slightly alarmed at the prospect of another person in the compartment, but Hermione ignored him with the ease of someone who had been ignoring social cues her entire life and found it efficient. "Is it true you vanished for 4 years?" she asked. "More or less." "Where did you go?" "Wales." "What did you do there?" "Trained, studied, grew up." Harry paused, "and bonded with a dragon." The compartment went very, very quiet. Ron's chocolate frog, halfway to his mouth, stopped in midair. Hermione's book slid off her lap and hit the floor with a thump. Outside the window, England continued to roll by, oblivious. "A dragon," Ron said. "A dragon," Harry confirmed. "A real dragon, a living, actual dragon. Her name is Nyx. She's 25 feet long, she breathes violet fire, and she's currently flying about 2,000 feet above this train under concealment charms." Harry paused. "She says hello." "I said no such thing, just go with it." Ron's mouth worked soundlessly. Hermione, to her credit, recovered faster. "That's not possible," she said. "Dragon bonding was outlawed by the Ministry of Magic in 1709 under the Warlocks Convention, which banned dragon breeding on British soil but said nothing about pre-existing bonds with eggs that were laid before the convention was enacted. Nyx's egg predates the ministry by about 700 years. Harry smiled. "I've done my legal research." Hermione stared at him with an expression that combined horror, fascination, and something that looked suspiciously like respect. "You've done your legal research. You're 11. "I had good teachers." "You have a dragon." "I do." "Can I see her?" Harry glanced out the window. The sky was grey, overcast, empty to the naked eye. But through the bond he could feel Nyx above them, a dark shape in the clouds, pacing the train, her vast wings beating in slow, powerful strokes. "When we get to Hogwarts," Harry said, "I'll introduce you." The train rolled on. Ron recovered enough to bombard Harry with questions about Nyx. How big was she? Very. Could she really breathe fire? Yes. Had she ever eaten anyone? Not yet, though she'd threatened. And Hermione pulled out every book she had, searching for references to Dragon Lord bonds with the focus of a hunting dog on a scent. A boy named Neville appeared, looking for his toad, and stayed when Ron found the toad under a seat, and Hermione dried Neville's grateful tears with a matter-of-fact competence that belied her age. A fourth visitor arrived in the mid-afternoon. The compartment door slid open, and a boy stood in the frame, pale, pointed, with white blonde hair gelled back and a sneer that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. 2 larger boys flanked him like bookends. "They're saying Harry Potter is on the train," the boy said. His voice was drawling, confident, performing for an audience. His gaze swept the compartment and landed on Harry. "That's you, I suppose." "Draco Malfoy," Harry said. He saw no reason to pretend he didn't know. "Your father is Lucius. Your mother is Narcissa, née Black. We're related distantly." Malfoy's sneer faltered. He hadn't expected to be known. "You've heard of my family." "I've heard of everyone's family. It's called preparation." Harry gestured at the compartment. "Want to sit down, or are you just here to establish a pecking order?" Ron choked on a chocolate frog. Hermione bit her lip. Neville looked like he wanted to disappear. Malfoy's pale face flushed. "Some wizarding families are better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort." His eyes flicked to Ron, dismissive. I can help you there. I appreciate the offer, but I choose my own friends, Malfoy, based on character, not lineage. Harry's voice was pleasant, calm, and completely immovable. You're welcome to prove yours, but leading with an insult to someone in my compartment isn't a great start. The air between them crackled. Malfoy's bodyguards shifted. Ron had his fists clenched. Hermione was very still. Then Harry felt it, a ripple through the bond. Nyx, 2,000 feet above, had sensed the tension. She was descending. Slowly, invisibly, but descending. Nyx, don't, the pale boy is threatening you. The pale boy is an 11-year-old child with too much hair product. Stand down, a reluctant huff. Nyx leveled off and resumed her patrol, but the bond vibrated with her displeasure. Malfoy, unaware of the dragon circling above his head, held Harry's gaze for a long moment. Then something shifted behind his eyes, a recalculation, a reassessment, the Malfoy survival instinct recognizing that this was not the Harry Potter he'd expected. We'll see, Malfoy said. He turned and left, bodyguards trailing. Ron exhaled. Blimey, Harry. You just stared down Malfoy like he was nothing. He's not nothing. He's a kid whose father taught him the wrong things. That doesn't make him evil, it makes him unlucky. Hermione looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. You're not what I expected, she said. Nobody ever is. The train slowed. Out the window the sky had darkened, and in the distance, through the clouds, through the rain, through the gathering dusk, Harry saw it, Hogwarts. The castle was vast. Towers and turrets and battlements rising from a rocky hillside, lit by 1,000 windows, reflected in the black lake below. It looked like something from a dream or a nightmare, depending on your perspective. It was ancient, powerful, and alive with magic that Harry could feel through the bond like a heartbeat, and circling above it, hidden by layers of concealment magic, was Nyx. I'm here, she sent. The castle is impressive. For a human building, high praise from a dragon. I am feeling generous. A pause. The grounds are extensive. I found a clearing near the forest, large enough for me, sheltered, good sightlines. The old wizard has been as good as his word. There are no wards preventing my approach. Thank you, Nyx. Come find me after the feast. I want to hear about the sorting ceremony, and bring food. Human feasts always have meat. Harry smiled and turned from the window. Ron was pressing his face against the glass. Hermione had her hands clasped, vibrating with anticipation. Neville was gripping his toad so tightly, the animal looked alarmed. The train stopped. Harry Potter, Dragon Lord, head of House Potter, heir of House Black, raised by goblins, trained by warriors, bonded to an ancient dragon, picked up his trunk, took a breath and stepped onto the platform at Hogsmeade Station. It was time. The Great Hall was everything the books described and nothing like Harry had imagined. The enchanted ceiling showed a stormy sky. Candles floated in midair. 4 long tables stretched the length of the hall, packed with students in black robes, and at the high table the Hogwarts staff sat in a row, Dumbledore in the centre, Snape to his left in black, a woman in green with a severe bun and spectacles, a tiny man perched on a stack of cushions, a large man with a wild beard who beamed at the first years, and every eye in the room was on Harry. He'd expected it. He'd prepared for it. But the weight of 500 stairs was physical, a pressure against his skin, and even 4 years of training couldn't entirely suppress the instinct to shrink, to hide, to become invisible. You are not invisible, Nyx sent from the clearing outside. You are fire. Let them see. The sorting hat sat on a stool at the front of the hall. It was old, patched, and when it opened a tear at its brim and began to sing, Harry studied it with the bond-enhanced perception that had become second nature. The hat was sentient. Its magic was ancient, founder-era, layered with 1,000 years of accumulated consciousness. It read minds, Harry knew. It would read his. Names were called. Students were sorted. Hermione went to Gryffindor, looking flushed and delighted. Neville went to Gryffindor, looking shocked. Malfoy went to Slytherin, looking satisfied. Potter, Harry. The hall went silent, not quiet, silent. 500 people stopped breathing. Harry walked to the stool. He sat. McGonagall, the severe woman in green, placed the hat on his head, and the brim fell over his eyes and the world disappeared. Well, said a small voice in his ear, this is unusual. The hat's presence in his mind was nothing like Nyx's. Where the bond was vast and warm and organic, the hat was precise, surgical. a needle threading through his thoughts with centuries of practice. Harry felt it probe his memories, the cupboard, the egg, the bond, the training, the meeting with Dumbledore, and felt it recoil just slightly at the depth of what it found, a Dragon Lord. I haven't sorted a Dragon Lord since Aldrich Potter himself. He was Gryffindor, though he could have been anything. Brave, yes, but cunning and intelligent and loyal in equal measure. You're like him, more so than any Potter since. The hat paused, rummaging deeper, courage extraordinary, not the reckless kind. The deliberate kind, which is rarer and more valuable. You've faced things that would break most adults, and you've come through them with your compassion intact. That's Gryffindor to the bone, but there's ambition too, not for power, for agency, for the right to determine your own fate. That's Slytherin, and a mind sharp, methodical, hungry for knowledge. That's Ravenclaw, and loyalty to your dragon, to your goblin, to the old man who taught you politics. Loyalty so deep it's structural. That's Hufflepuff. You're all four houses, Harry Potter, just like your ancestor. So the question is, where will you do the most good? Harry thought about it. He thought about Arcturus's advice, Griffook's strategy, Kofi's pragmatism. He thought about Ron's easy friendship and Hermione's fierce intelligence and Neville's quiet courage. He thought about what he wanted, not what was strategic or political or useful, but what he wanted in the honest, uncomplicated way of a child who had been denied wanting for too long. He wanted to belong, to be part of something. To walk into a room and know that the people in it were his people, not because of blood or politics, but because they'd chosen each other. Gryffindor, he thought, where my parents were, where my friends are, where I can be Harry first and everything else second. The hat chuckled. Well said. Better be, Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table erupted. Ron was on his feet cheering. Hermione was clapping so hard her hands were a blur. Neville looked like he might cry. The noise was deafening, overwhelming, a wall of sound and acceptance that hit Harry like a physical force. He walked to the table. Ron made room. Harry sat down. Hands clapped his back, voices shouted his name. The Weasley twins, identical, grinning, dangerous-looking, started a chant that the table picked up. And through the bond, from the clearing beyond the castle, Nix's voice, warm, proud, fierce. You belong, Harry, you always have. Now they know it too. The feast was magnificent. Harry ate roast beef and Yorkshire pudding and treacle tart and drank pumpkin juice, and he talked to Ron about Quidditch and Hermione about transfiguration and Neville about herbology. And for the first time in his life, he was a child among children, and it was enough. It was more than enough. He slipped out after the feast while the Gryffindors followed Percy Weasley to the common room. He told Ron he needed air, which was true, and walked out through the castle's great oak doors into the grounds. The night was clear, the stars bright, the air cold with approaching autumn. The lake glittered in the moonlight. The forbidden forest was a dark mass on the horizon, and in the clearing near the forest's edge, Nix was waiting. She rose when he approached, all 25 feet of her unfolding from the ground, wings spreading, head lifting to catch his scent. Her scales drank the moonlight and gave back a faint violet glow, and her green eyes, his eyes, always his eyes, found him in the dark. Harry walked to her and pressed his forehead against her snout. She lowered her head and they stood together in the silence, the castle rising behind them, the stars wheeling overhead. We made it, Harry whispered. We did. Was the ceremony everything you hoped? Better. I have friends, Nix, real ones, Ron, Hermione, Neville, they're good people. They liked me, not because of the scar or the dragon or the houses, because of me. I could have told you that. She nuzzled him, warm and gentle. I have been telling you that. I know, but hearing it from a dragon is different from feeling it from people your own age. I will try not to be offended. A pause laden with fondness. Eat, sleep. Tomorrow you learn magic in the old castle where your blood parents learned, and I will be here, whenever you need me. Always. Harry pulled back and looked at her, the dragon who had chosen him in a frozen vault when he was 6 years old. The partner who had grown with him, fought with him, flown with him, held him together when the world tried to pull him apart. She was vast and terrifying and ancient and beautiful, and she was his and he was hers, and nothing, not Dumbledore, not Voldemort, not prophecy or politics or the weight of expectations would ever change that. I love you, he said. He'd never said it in words before. Through the bond, yes, a constant, flowing warmth that needed no articulation, but the words mattered. Words were how humans sealed the things that mattered. Nix was quiet for a long moment. Then, through the bond, her voice, deeper now, richer, carrying the resonance of 4 years of shared life, "And I you, my Harry. My dragon lord. My other half," she settled back into the clearing, tucking her wings, and Harry walked back to the castle. The great oak doors opened for him. The entrance hall was warm and bright. Somewhere above, the Gryffindor common room was full of students talking and laughing, and his friends were among them, and a 4-poster bed waited with clean sheets and a thick duvet and no lock on the door. He climbed the stairs. He gave the password. The common room welcomed him with warmth and noise, and Ron's voice shouting, "Harry, where'd you go? You missed the exploding snap tournament." Harry sat down in the armchair by the fire, and Ron sat on one side and Hermione on the other and Neville across, and they talked about nothing and everything, and it was ordinary and extraordinary and exactly what he'd always wanted. And outside, in the clearing, Nyx lifted her head and roared, a full, deep, resonant roar that rolled across the grounds and echoed off the castle walls. Students ran to windows. Staff looked up from their marking. Hagrid stepped out of his hut, looked at the sky and whispered, "Blimey." In his tower office, Dumbledore stood at the window and watched the dark shape against the stars. Behind him, Snape stood in the doorway. "Well, Severus," Dumbledore murmured, "it seems we have a dragon at Hogwarts." "We have a dragon lord at Hogwarts," Snape corrected. "Which is considerably more significant." "Yes," Dumbledore's blue eyes reflected the distant violet glow of Nyx's scales. "Yes, it is." He turned from the window. His face was troubled, thoughtful, and beneath it all, buried deep, but visible to those who knew where to look, something that might have been hope. "Everything I planned," Dumbledore said quietly. "Every piece I placed, every move I made." A child in a cupboard, growing up unknown, arriving at Hogwarts meek and malleable and grateful for the magical world, ready to be guided, ready to accept the role the prophecy demands. He shook his head. "Instead, I get a dragon lord. You get a boy," Snape said. "A boy who survived everything you subjected him to and came out stronger. A boy with his mother's eyes and his father's stubbornness and more courage than either of them." His voice was quiet, stripped of its usual acid. "You should be grateful, Albus. The prophecy called for a champion. You got one. Just not the kind you expected." Dumbledore was silent for a long time. "No," he said at last, "not the kind I expected at all." Outside, Nyx settled into her clearing, and the castle settled into the night, and the stars turned overhead, and somewhere in the Gryffindor common room, Harry Potter laughed at a joke Ron told, and the sound was bright and young and free, and the future, vast, uncertain, full of danger and wonder and the promise of things yet to come, stretched out before them all like a sky without limits.